Call the meeting to order. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome Select Water today, and I'd like to thank the office for setting up that tour yesterday of Tallgrass and Meta. It was an outstanding tour and appreciate it. Now we need a recognition of a quorum of the members.
Good morning, everyone. Commissioner Dalton.
Here.
Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Ron Vore.
Excused.
Commissioner Jared Whitebull.
Approval of minutes. Does anybody have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have to take roll call.
This was Select Water Committee meeting with the Water Development Commission on Thursday, August 6th. Jones, Senator Larson, Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Chestick, Representative Fornstrom, Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Strock, Vice Chairman Boner, Chairwoman Lawley.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Eve.
All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to item 4 of the minutes. Does anybody have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
The motion has been made to approve the minutes for the prior meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have anybody that wants to make a motion about the executive session minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion regarding the executive session minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
I'd like to interrupt. I do not believe there would be minutes for an executive session. Is that correct?
No, there is.
There is. And we had an opportunity to read through them yesterday and go ahead with your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, Commissioner Mark Cott, move to authorize the Director of Water Development Office to submit the Regional Conservation Partnership RCPP proposal.
Excuse me.
Is that the wrong one?
That is the wrong one.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's what I got.
Mr. Chairman, we just need to accept the
Yeah.
executive session minutes.
Okay, that's all we have to do. I'm sorry. Okay, I accept the executive session minutes. Apologize for that.
A motion been made to accept executive motion minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we're moving on. We are going to go to financial status update, and it's in tab B.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask which page this starts on real quick from Katie. So page 19 of your e-notebooks, and I'm going to hand it over to our fairly new fiscal manager, Dale Van Lenningham. So take it easy on him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dale Van Landingham, fiscal manager. Today, we're going to go over the fiscal status update. Just a reminder that the state fiscal year is from July 1st to June 30th. As we are balancing the books every year, we run through and create projections to find the estimated balance available for the legislative session for the water development counts 1, 2, and 3. The first thing we're going to look at is account 1, which, like Director said, is page 19. I was going to walk through each section of the first account just as a refresher where we get our numbers and where they come from. And then the counts 2 and 3, I'll just read the available balance. And then if there's any questions, please stop me. First of all, we start with at the top of the page 19, the cash balance as of June 30th of 25, which was $108,917,096. The next section is the fiscal year 26 revenues. And those are broken down by taxes, which is the severance distribution, interest, which is the investment income from cash balance, loan and interest repayments, and then other is water sales and other small sources of income. So the total revenues for fiscal year 26 was $26,141,990. The fiscal year 26 expenditures was $39,355,324, which left us a cash balance of $630 of $95,703,762. The next section is the outstanding commitments. We have active appropriations, which is open encumbrance contracts or obligations, expenditures paid, and then the total commitments that we have currently on the books is $94,014,152. So if we shut down business today and paid all our obligations, our cash balance would be $1,689,610. The next section is anticipated revenues for the next 2 years. And then we have a subtotal of anticipated revenues of $44,595,000, which leaves us a balance available for appropriation of $284,610. And just a note on account 1, if you remember from last year, the projection was $49.5 million for fiscal years 26 and 27. We spent about half, leaving $26 million in account 1 for appropriation. Because of the Board of Control and interstate streams moving to general fund, and we also had a Douglas well purchase, as well as outperforming of investments, that increased our balance by $20 million to the $46 million. So I'll pause if there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Dale? Any questions? Dale, thank you on that. That's a positive, a lot of positives, what you just talked about. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could real quick, even though we do have a larger balance than we expected coming into this year, and technically that would be money that we could spend, remember in a biennium, we like to spend about half the first year and leave half for the second year. So we're spreading the money around as best we can. We don't know what projects we're going to get in that second year. So this is going to be the second year of the biennium, what we all talk about in November with September 1 construction applications, and then applications we already considered from planning back in May. So even though we have a much larger number, we're going to take a critical eye at all these projects just like we normally do. We don't want to go crazy and just fund everything because, moving into the future, assuming there are no large infusions of funds, even with the Board of Control now in general fund, we're looking at on a biennial basis, probably about $30 million available in account 1. So it would be about $15 million a year. So again, going to be critical of new projects. If we can carry some of that over into future years to then, take care of the demands we might see in the future, we'll try to do that. But obviously, if we have good projects this year, which I imagine we will, and we'll probably have quite a few of them, a good project's probably cheaper to build now than it is a couple years from now.
The available balance in account 2, too far, is And then account $4,728. I'll pause if there's any questions on.
Going out of or coming out of last year. Can't remember. And I think and on the account balance plus that account balance is quite a bit bigger because of the I'll say the infusion of funds from outside our program for Laprelle Dam in the amount of $60 million and Goshen Irrigation District in the amount of $20 million. So that really bumped up the account to balance. So kind of sim construction projects. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on to the reservoir O&M accounts. That is on page 23 of the PDF. Annually, you're charged with reviewing the reservoir O&M accounts to determine if there's any condition where we might need to transfer funds from an account like the Buffalo Bill to another to cover any large obligations of O&M in one of the other reservoir accounts. That is what this review is. On page 23, which we're already there, there's a memo that identifies the reservoir accounts that are part of the review. And I'll just read through which accounts we're talking about. It would be Fontenelle, Buffalo Bill, Palisades, Miscellaneous Water Investment, Keyhole, High Savory, Pathfinder, Glendo, Lake DeSmet, and Middle Piney. On 24, it lists out the conclusions and recommendations for each account. After completing the analysis with no large pending commitments, we concluded that all counts are stable and no transfer or action is required. If you go to page 25 of the PDF, this kind of gives you a background and history of each reservoir account. It will list legislative authorization, original appropriation amounts, source of funds, typical expenses, typical revenues, and the water asset. So if you're interested on how each of those accounts started, there's that next few pages that list that out for you. For if we turn to page 28, which is the Fontenelle Reservoir account, I was going to go through, kind of walk through what we do to figure out our 10-year projections. We estimate, I'm sorry. We think the count, I'm sorry, let me start over. So what we try to do is project what we think the account is going to look like after 10 years. And in order to do that, we use historical averages, typically about 10-year average of what prior expenses and revenues were given to us, a number to project out. For those expenditures like the operations and maintenance annual obligations, we apply an inflation factor of 5%. And we've been doing that for the last 5 or 6 years. It's kind of a historical average. We don't want to over or underestimate what we think the insurance or the interest rate is going to be, or the inflation rate is going to be, excuse me. And so we apply that 5% multiplier on the O&M charges. We also project out the investment earnings projection. And what we do there is we use the State Treasurer's Office quarterly report, which is from May of this year. And it is a 5-year average rate for a 5-year from the age of, I'm sorry, falling apart here. We use a 5-year average rate of return state agency pool, which this year is 2.4%. We have been outperforming that, but again, we don't want to over or underestimate what that is. So looking at the Fontenelle Reservoir account, you can see on page 28 that it is a 10-year of this is 10-year of actual revenues and expenses that happened starting from 2017 to 2026, which left us a balance as of June 30 of 26 of $5,529,599.64. The next section below that is the 10-year projection that we talked about with the investment income with the 2.4%. And then the inflation rate, we used the 5% on the O&M charges, which left the projection for the 10-year average for Fontenelle with an ending balance of $3,786,097. And then the section below that is any notes pertaining to that particular account and for future future uses of the Fontenelle Reservoir account, and then conclusions and recommendations for each one of the accounts, which, and this one is there's no excess funds available at this time. So that is kind of for each account, we have a 10-year projection, and then also in that first memo, we have also our recommendations and conclusions. So I'll pause if there's any questions, or if you want me to go through each account, which may be painful for me.
Does anybody have questions for Dale on these accounts? You've all been around these before. Jared, do you have any questions? You understand what he's talking about? Okay. We have an accountant here. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, that's the important one right there. I was, when she sent out the e-notebook, I went through all of these and looked, and it appeared that everything was in order, and your recommendation is solid. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's no action needed on that. We just review them every year. So I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
The next agenda item is construction closeout, project closeout memos.
What page we're on? Katie, can you tell us the page number we start on? 46.
Good morning, Bill.
Morning, morning, Chairman, Select Water Committee Commissioners. I'm Bill Brewer. I'm Deputy Director of Construction. Going to run through 3 closeout memos for projects that have been completed this year. Just one thing that's came up in the last few months is there is no requirement that these are read off to you during the meetings. So the question would be in the future if you would want to just have them in the e-notebook to review, and then I could answer questions, or if we present them, and it could be a meeting by meeting. This usually takes 10-15 minutes, but if there's a meeting that was really busy, like the November meeting, maybe we choose not to read them off. So just something to think about in the future. No decisions being made here today. So the first one I'm going to go through is the Gillette Regional Extensions Phase 4, 2022 project. This is part of the continuing regionalization up there in Gillette, part of that project where we've been spreading out throughout the whole area. This project connected the Stoop, Eagle Ridge, and People's Improvement sewer districts into the Gillette Regional project. The appropriation was $1,125,600. Ultimately, that was at a 67% grant. Ultimately, the sponsor ended up paying some additional costs related to that. So you'll see the percentage came down. They did not ask for additional funding. They covered those additional costs themselves. So that was nice of them. Engineer on this project was Morrison Marley. They completed the work for a little over $244,000. The construction work was completed by Hot Iron Incorporated, and They came in slightly under the engineer's estimate at a little over $1.3 million for the construction of this project. This project had quite a bit of miscellaneous costs, but a lot of that was that additional funds that the sponsor paid for. So it shows up in our records as miscellaneous costs because we basically considered them ineligible because the sponsor paid for those extras. So it looks pretty heavy there, but it's really most of that is that ineligible. Some of the rest of that was related to easements and property acquisition to run that pipeline project. So the overall final project costs on this one was a little over $1.8 million. The state paid a little over $1.1 million of that work, and the sponsor paid just under $700,000 worth of that work. The project is now closed and completed, and we are slowly wrapping up all those Gillette projects. The major portion of that regionalization has been completed. You will still see some smaller projects trickling in, but the big projects up there are pretty much wrapping up. So, any questions on the Gillette Regional Extension project? Okay. So moving on to the Kirby Creek spillway replacement. We've been doing work with the Kirby Creek irrigation district there for a few years now, upgrading their system. This was a project that was funded in the 2025 legislation. It was a quick turnaround. This project had been partially designed under a previous project, so this was basically mostly just the construction funding and a little bit of adjustments to design to bring this one in. But it was a very quick turnaround on completing this project. The appropriation was a little over $550,000. That was 100% funded. It was 50% grant, 50% loan. The engineer for this project was JUB Engineers. They completed all of the engineering work, both design and construction fees, for a little over $76,000. Wyodec Energy was the contractor for this project. It came in over the engineer's estimate, but we received two bids. They were pretty competitive with each other, so we believe that was a reasonable bid for the project. There was a little bit of miscellaneous costs on this one. This was basically the legal ads for the bidding that was related. $84,000. $20.06. And this project is now completed and closed out. So, any questions on the Kirby Creek Spillway project? Creek Irrigation District. Again, this is another project that was broke up into multiple phases. I believe this was the third phase of this project to pretty much complete the project. The appropriation was just over $6 million for this. That they also received a BOR water smoke was just under $2.4 million. So the total project budget for this was just under $8.5 million to complete this work. Western Heritage Consulting was the engineer for this project. They completed their work for a little under $700,000. The construction company was Prospect Construction. They came in just over the engineer's estimate, about $7 million. They were the only bidder, and the original bid was substantially over our budget. However, they were able to work with the contractor. Contractor had some cost savings options and some adjustments, and we were able to get it down within budget and move the project forward. The miscellaneous costs related to this one is the advertisements that were completed, power to the project. On most of these projects, whoever the regional power company is, we just have to pay them You know, if it's Rocky Mountain Power, whoever, they tell us the price it is to bring power in and put transformers in. There is no bidding, there is no options. It's kind of a take it or leave it cost. It's a little frustrating at times, but that is the way it is, and that's across the region what we have to do. There's one utility provider in each area. So, but the cost, honestly, the cost for that power was fairly reasonable. We had to change all the transformers at this pump station because we're upgrading the power. So we had to bring power in and upgraded transformers to run these new pumps. So overall, the final project ended up a little over $8.1 million between all the funding sources, and we will be reverting a little over $137,000 to account 2 for future projects. And this project is now complete and closed out. So any questions on the Owl Creek improvements project?
Are there any questions for Bill about any of these projects? Commissioner?
Just like comment that I've finally been on the commission long enough to see some project. Just like to comment that I've finally been on the commission long enough to see some projects completed that we approved in previous years. Some of these take a long time, but some of these are kind of near and dear to me, these irrigation ones, and particularly in my division up there, that Owl Creek project in the Kirby Creek. We approved those previously, and I'm glad to see they're done, and hopefully those irrigators will benefit from those projects. I'm glad to see that money going to agriculture. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Craig?
So, Mr. Chairman, no knock on Bill, but as you can see, these project closeout memos for construction can be a little dry. So that's why we're asking, you know, in the future, if you want us to just say, hey, are there any questions? And if there's not, we just move on as compared to having them run through these closeouts. So think about that. Next time we have them come up, I'll ask you before the meeting and we can handle it then. So thank you.
Can avoid me.
Mr. Chairman, so with that, our next agenda item is a quick Laprel update that Bill Brewer is going to give us. Give us a second here to get it up on the screen. And I apologize, we had a projector go out this morning, so we're not able to project onto both screens. So hopefully everybody can see this well enough.
Okay, so I'm going to give a brief update. And Tommy, if you want to come around where you can see, yeah. So you're probably more up to date on this than I am, to be honest, but it's going to display, right? Okay. So I'm just going to give a brief update on the Laprel Dam construction. So this project has been moving forward pretty fast and furious. So we'll just move on. Katie, next slide. So for those not familiar, this project is located between Casper and Douglas, just south of the highway. And if you look at the slide on the right there, you can see it is just upstream of the Ayers Natural Bridge. So this is an important little area here. Katie, next slide. So just looking at this photo and kind of chopping off a little bit. The main reason I wanted to keep this one in there, the old dam has been removed. It was removed as of March of 2025. The new dam, you can kind of see in the inset there, will be located just downstream of the old dam. One of the main requirements is that we have a 20,000 acre foot permit that cannot be exceeded or increased because it's part of the Platte River recovery. We cannot increase that, even knowing we kind of have the opportunity physically. Legally, we cannot increase that. So although the dam is downstream and you would think we're gaining volume from the face of the old dam to the back of the new dam, really there's 100 years of sedimentation in that reservoir. So we had lost quite a bit of volume. We're able to recover that volume at this point. So that spillway will ultimately be tweaked just enough to make sure we're at 20,000 acre feet of storage. But like I say, it's not going to be that much lower of an spillway than the old one because of that sediment we're making up for. So, but we will end up with 20,000 acre feet. And just kind of for using this picture because it's a good picture. When you're looking at talking about a reservoir and we're talking about left abutment, right abutment, that's looking downstream. So in this case, we're looking upstream. So on the right-hand side is the left abutment, and on the left-hand side is the right abutment. Just so when we get in other pictures. The one thing I'd like to show here is this shows really good how steep that left abutment is, the right-hand side of the picture. And then it's kind of shallower on the other side. The problem is this is a pretty good fold in the rock up there. And that right-hand abutment, the rocks are sitting on the slope right about the same slope as the slope, which is the reason the slope is that slope. So as they're working on it, these layers want to move. So it's been a little bit more challenge on that one side. So the part of the concern was it's so steep on the one side, that's actually being easier to excavate because the rocks want to fall into the slope if you think about it, where on the other side, they want to slide down the slope. So, okay, next slide. Okay, so this is basically a lot of study was gone into what the dam would be replaced. That's all been covered before. It has been decided for a roller compacted concrete dam. And that's mainly because the materials in the area, there's very little material to build a dam with, period. And it's not really good material to build a dam with. So all of the material for this dam is being imported from down by Glen Rock, I believe. So Guernsey. Okay. Next slide, please. So this one's really getting cut off. Mainly what I wanted to show on this slide is the dam has tweaked a little bit from this slide. However, what we're dealing with this summer is kind of that multicolored area. This is the foundation of the rock. We're trying to get this valley excavated down to the stable bedrock that we can actually found a dam on. So that's the work that's going on this year. And that's kind of that color-coded stuff there you can kind of see. Okay, next slide. Okay, and next slide you can. Okay, so as I said, this is the left abutment. And because it's so steep, they actually had to build a ramp up. Some of the early work at the very, very top, they were able to bring a road in and that road will stay to clean the upper portion of the slope. However, if they work down the slope, they can't get equipment in on the slope. It's too steep. So they've actually had to backfill and fill the area to build a ramp, which is what you can kind of see on their left-hand side. And then they can come up that ramp that they're building and clean up that slope and remove all the loose debris, get everything cleaned up and down to a competent material that we can build a dam against. And then basically they'll tear all that ramp back out again as they come down the slope and then clean up the bottom. So unfortunately, they had to do a lot of work to put material in to get other material out. So next slide. Okay, so this is the right abutment, and just to make things totally confusing, the left-hand side photo is looking downstream, so it is truly the right-hand side we're looking at there. You can see lots of crisscrossing roads going up there to kind of clean that up. And then on that right-hand photo, it's the left-hand side of the valley that they're working on. And it's kind of hard to see from this photo, but the rock layers are literally pretty much laying right on that slope. So early on, they had gone in and cleaned what they call scaling, cleaned up all that slope, got the loose debris, got any loose rock. They go up there with hammer, kind of pry bars and stuff and see if they can pry anything loose. A lot of that is actually done hand work. Guys up there actually moving rocks and throwing them down the cliff and stuff to get that cleaned up. So they'd gotten it cleaned up, the very upper area, then came in with the equipment. And mainly you do that early hand work because you don't want rocks coming down on you when you're running the equipment. And you can judge it better by being up there on the slope physically. But then they brought the equipment in, started cleaning up, got a good portion of it cleaned up and had an area that was a little harder than they could get with the equipment. Brought in a blasting crew, did a small blast, and rocks up the hill from them slid on those planes. So then they had to kind of stop the work, had to go back up, rework things. They reworked their blasting plan. My understanding is they were going to go with a smaller diameter hole, slightly deeper, more of them to get the blast to not reverberate through the rock as bad. So that was reworked. My understanding is they're back up and working again on that in moving forward. Side note, little advantage of that is while the blasters were down there, we needed blasters at the Levitt Reservoir, and it's the same company working. So we got a really good price on the Levitt Reservoir because the guys were already in state. So they ran up to Levitt, did a quick blast at Levitt, and came back down and worked this one. So we didn't have to necessarily pay a lot of downtime while they were waiting for things to be reworked. So, okay, next slide, Katie. So looking here on the right-hand side, you can see or actually on the left-hand side, I'm sorry. This is the actual concrete plant being set up, this portable plant. This will be making the roller compacted concrete material. Compacted concrete doesn't look like normal concrete. It basically looks more like a soil, like a soil that's been wetted up and ready to compact. And that's how it's worked in the field. It's actually moved into place a lot of times with front end loaders and stuff like that. Spread, very similar to the way you would spread soil to do, compaction, do a compaction dam, except it's got a small amount of cement in there that actually cements everything up. It's not super high strength cement, but compared to like a earthen dam, it's much more stronger than an earthen dam. And in this circumstance, it's much cheaper to build than trying to import soil. Probably in November, I'll give you an update on the Levitt Reservoir, and the multiple layers and everything that go into an earthen dam is actually a lot more complex, and trying to bring in all those multiple types of material would have been very expensive here. In this case, we're bringing in basically one type of material and building the whole dam with that one type of material. So that's the plant. It'll be set up. It's being set up right now. It'll be ran through a whole bunch of tests to make sure we get the right mix working on that equipment. And then later this fall, they will pour what's considered a test pad to prove that their mix works. The contractor is also working that test pad in. It'll also be part of the spillway on the reservoir. So after the water technically finishes up on the dam and off the spillway, it'll be that first portion of the stream that water hits, so we don't get heavy erosion right there. But we're kind of working that test pad in as part of an erosion feature also. So get some extra bang for our buck there. And then just on the right-hand side there is a lot of the equipment getting staged up. This is the south staging area. It's just downstream from the dam. On that left side photo there, you can look up and see the slopes where the dam will actually be. So we're just downstream of the dam in this site. Okay, Katie, next slide. Okay, this is the north staging area. This is where all the material is coming in. When I was up there about 3 weeks ago, they had 50% of the material for the new dam already delivered. They're moving right along. I do not know what the deadline is to finish delivering the material, but my understanding is it will all be delivered this year. So by the end of this year, we will have all the material on site for the dam. So those stockpiles are actually getting pretty good size up there. When you drive up the road heading to Ayers Natural Bridge, you can definitely see them piling up there. Tommy can see it from her house, so I apologize for that.
I think you have 80, you're saying 80 or something like 70 by now.
Okay. So 70 to 80% is on site as of this week. So sounds like, okay. Next slide. And you can just go to the next slide. So this is basically the 26 schedule of what we're doing. So the total project cost estimate came in on February 17th, and that was the contracted price with the CMAR, the guaranteed maximum price. And then as I'm learning more and more with guaranteed maximum price, there's a guaranteed price, and then there's like 20 contingencies tacked onto that guaranteed price. So that's the guaranteed price at the time with contingencies moving forward. In February, and I brought this up before, but I'll just kind of hit on it again. This dam is kind of being built in phases where we're getting approved. We got approved for the foundation design, and then we're able to contract that and get that work going before the dam was actually 100% designed. And the SEO has been working well with us to approve this in phases. I don't know of any other reservoirs where we've been allowed to start construction on a project before we had 100% design on the dam completed, but they have been approving us in stages, which is allowing us to move this project much quicker than we would normally move a project through. So, but the 90% design package on the dam was received February 27th. Construction at the site actually started on March 9th. Putting in March, it was mostly putting in access roads and getting those staging areas ready and everything else. But then they moved right into starting on the dam foundation as soon as we had permission. This year is primarily related to the foundation preparation work that we showed you earlier. Also, bringing in materials with long lead times. Some of the gates and stuff like that, there's like a 1.5 year delivery time on those. So as soon as we issued the contract, they ordered those parts that they know they might not install for a year to have them on site when they need them. Also bringing in all the aggregate this year so that next year there's no delays. We know that when we start building the dam, we've got the material there. We don't have to worry about something happening in a quarry going out of business or changing ownership or anything else. We've got all the material in place. The other thing that will go on late this summer, early fall, is starting the grouting. So basically all the natural geology around the dam will be grouted to fill in all the gaps and cracks and voids and anything else that's in there. So about 75% of that will be done this fall, and that'll cover basically the bottom of the reservoir, that kind of stream bed off into the side slopes. The contractors, as a cost savings, said basically they can do the grouting on the sides, the side slopes, easier from the actual dam. It's easier to set the drill rigs up on the dam. So we'll do the bottom portion this summer. After the dam is built, we'll actually drill through the dam into the native soil or into the native rock and grout it all the way back out again. And that was a cost savings option brought in by the CMAR. And one of the reasons is it is a good idea to have the CMAR on early, as they can come up with these construction ideas that fit the engineering need, but make it easier on the contractor and adjust the price accordingly. So that'll happen later. And then, like I say, late fall, we'll do that roller compacted test section that will also serve as the future kind of erosion protection at the end of the dam. And then the full dam package was supposed to be arrived on Monday. Because I've been running around, I don't know whether it has actually came in or not. I didn't have a chance to check with the project manager to see if it was here on Monday or not, but that should be the 100% design package, and we'll have that reviewed and should have that approved through SEO and everyone else well in advance of actually starting construction. Okay, next slide, Katie. Okay, so construction schedule moving forward. So in 2026, obviously the foundation excavation base grouting is in progress. That's working along. Primarily in 2027 will be the RCC placement and the slope grouting, as I just mentioned. That may start early. The contractor has said all along, if they've got the weather to work and they're ready to move forward, they're just going to keep rolling. But this schedule is based on assuming there's a winter shutdown, assuming we actually have a good winter. As I was kind of joking with Tommy yesterday, if we have good weather, we're going to get a dam built. If we have bad construction weather, at least maybe we get some water. So either one can be a positive on this project. Some things, cutting roads back from being haul road width down to normal traffic type widths and stuff like that. So the plan is 3 years from now, I'm giving you a closeout on this project. So I know that was kind of quick and stuff, but just wanted to give you an update on where this project is.
Bill, when you first started, you talked about the material having to be hauled in because the material there wasn't adequate for a dam. Is that part of the reason the dam failed, the old dam?
No, not really. I mean, the old dam I don't honestly know where the aggregate came from for the old dam. But it's kind of a combination of things on that old dam of why the concrete was weakening up. So I don't know if I could dive into exactly why the concrete, the structure of that dam was a lot different than other dams are. It was built at a time when concrete structures, the concrete was very expensive and labor was very cheap. So it was built with minimal concrete. So some of that is that it is a beautiful structure, in my opinion. But it was not kind of built to the standards we would today. And then there was definitely some concrete issues with that dam. When they were tearing down that dam, there's parts that just kind of disintegrated into dust. And that's probably kind of a mixture of the design for the concrete, and it may have something to do with the aggregate used for that structure.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Bill on Laprelle?
Mr. Chairman. This is really more for the director, but maybe Bill could answer it. Myself and Commissioner Pence and Lawson, we drive by this project every time we come down for a meeting. Is there any possibility at some point that something could be arranged? We could drive up there and see what they're doing. Is it a secured site? Is it off limits to public, or what's the access to it?
I'd say they've been fairly open to letting us up there and visit. Obviously, I don't want to delay construction, but my guess is if we wanted to make some kind of arrangement to get up there. Right now, I don't know if there's a lot of exciting things to see, at least from my perspective. Maybe Representative Strzok could give us a different opinion on her, whether it's worth seeing at this point or not. But I would think maybe next summer, it'd definitely be a little more interesting to see.
We'll just stay in touch with you on that, and maybe when we get to a point where you think it'd be something interesting, we could make arrangements. And if a few would like to, I'd like to go see it when it's maybe under construction on the, putting in the main gates and those kind of things, and as it moves along, kind of just watch it grow, I guess.
Yep, sounds good.
Thanks.
Senator?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're always willing to host you in Douglas for perhaps next year's tour. We'll see. But going back to, you said that construction manager at risk had some savings from the design. Do you know how much, is there a dollar figure on that?
I'm sure there is. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can get that to you and send it out. But I know they worked pretty heavily on that grouting idea. And that was part of that price that was agreed to in I think it was February or whatever. Was doing it by that method. So
Yeah, that'd be great if you could get a dollar figure. I think I'm sure my constituents would be interested, and the other members of the legislature would be interested in that.
Okay.
Second question, Mr. Chairman. I forgot how high were we with that partial fill? Was it 60%? How full was it? If you could.
It was 11,000 acre feet.
11,000.
It holds 20, so yeah. Mhm.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions for Bill? Thanks, Bill.
Okay, and then I'll probably give you an update on the Levitt Reservoir at the November meeting. It is scheduled for major construction to be finished next week. So
Good.
have another dam to show you that we've gotten taken care of.
Thank you. Now we go on to item number 8, other items requiring commission action.
Mr. Chairman, we have one item for that. And I'd ask Sarah Barkston, our grants administrator manager, to come up. And I'll just hand it over to her.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, Chairwoman, and Select Water Committee members. Before I get started, I do have some handouts, if it's okay. I just bring them forward and have you, or Jason will pass that around. All right, so as Jason mentioned, I'm the Water Development Office Grants Administrator, and my primary role is to help roll out the Regional Conservation Partnership Program grant that was awarded to the Commission in 2023 of $25 million for irrigation projects. In June of this year, the NRCS announced another funding opportunity for RCPP, and we got started right away on putting together a proposal and reaching out to potential partners, similar to the RCPP that we have for the Upper Colorado River Basin in Wyoming. This one will also have irrigation projects, both on farm and off farm. So in the handout that you all have, that's the proposed geographic area for this proposal. And it's the North Platte River Basin in Wyoming. And just for reference, there's some irrigation districts shown there, but there would be other potential water management entities, as they're referred to, that could apply for subawards, as well as the producers in that area. We are proposing to go after $10 million, which is the maximum award. And let's see, sorry. In addition to the irrigation projects, we're looking at, similar to the other RCPP, a holistic approach that would include aquatic habitat, stream bank stabilization type projects. Sorry, I just want to make sure. Yeah, so the efficiency type projects to address what is the primary resource concern, which is source water depletion. So we're looking at both surface water and groundwater, as well as plant health, livestock limitations, and again, like I said, aquatic habitat. So those are the key resource concerns, and then we'll have practices that we propose to NRCS that would be covered. Similar to the existing RCPP, we would also hire an engineering firm to provide technical assistance. We understand now that technical assistance can be provided for on-farm projects as well as off-farm. So that would include the design, pre-construction, permit, NEPA, anything needed to move forward with the project. Of course, we also need NRCS to sign off on all of this. So they will also continue to play a role. We are the lead partner, and we would be working in a partnership with, again, contributing partners and NRCS. So the reason I'm sitting here today is to let you all know that we are getting close to finalizing the proposal. It's due August 24th. However, we are going to expedite and deliver that proposal to NRCS on August 14th. We are, as the lead partner, we also need to make a contribution. So similar to the RCPP that's existing, we would provide technical assistance in my role, as well as other supporting office contributions. And we would also like to propose to provide some cash assistance that would come through our water development construction division applications. And we have an amount proposed there as well. So what we're looking for from you all this morning, from the commissioners this morning, is to approve the proposal submittal to NRCS, as well as for Director Mead to sign the partner letter, which I can describe in a little bit more detail if you're interested. But basically, it's a cash through our construction division that is forthcoming, so not yet applied for. And then, because we always have funds that we roll out. And then also the technical assistance in my position that's existing. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Sarah?
Mr. Chairman, I might just add to, in regards to the cash equivalent or match that Sarah's talking about, we put in there $500,000. There's no guarantee that the program will actually appropriate $500,000 to a particular project right now within the North Platte Basin. but history tells us, every year we have Goshen Irrigation District, for example, putting laterals into pipes or replacing pipes. We anticipate Casper Alcova Irrigation District, they're finishing up or in the middle of a level 2 study looking at laterals and how to reduce seepage and things like that. So fully anticipate we'll have applications. Again, this is a 5-year program, I believe. It Our experience has been it takes a little while to roll these out through the NRCS. I think there's a little bit of a fast track on this one. So that's how we came up with the number. I don't think it's overextending ourselves. There's no guarantees, but the likelihood of applications coming in the North Platte River Basin is pretty likely, and we should be able to hit that mark.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
you mentioned on-farm projects. What?
Develop the full list of but
Pivots as well.
Who would be the project sponsor in that case on an on-farm, through conservation district or the individual?
Tracks would be like districts up there we have on your map showing those.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair,
It's not, it is. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
yes, I'd like to make a motion. I, Commissioner Ron Cayley, move North Platte River Basin water efficiency and conservation projects letter that will contribute $591,500 in staff time and future construction dollars towards the RCPP project over 5 years.
There's a motion. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mr. Chairman, I just might add too that I believe the time frame to understand if we are awarded this through the NRCS is around the end of October. So depending on if that timeline sticks, we may have an update in November on if we were successful or not.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next agenda item is future meeting schedule.
Mr. Chairman, before we jump to that, we have usually a discussion agenda item, and I've got 2 quick things. The first one is a service award. Sometimes I like to embarrass our project managers, especially this one. And I just want to recognize, so Chase Tavelli has been working for the state of Wyoming for 30 years. So I want to recognize his dedication and hard work and really just his sense of humor. And so he's done a lot for our agency. He worked for the state engineer's office before that, and just makes this place a good place to work with his sense of humor. So I want to present him with the 30-year award real quick.
Let's go.
If you want him to give us a speech,
Yeah.
we won't put him on the spot. All right. The only other thing I wanted to mention in the discussion is just our tour yesterday, and recognizing Sarah, who was just up here, did a lot of work to get all those details worked out and communicating with the both Meta and Tallgrass and others trying to get these worked out. So I want to recognize her and all her hard work on that. And of course, Chair Lawley, who we had quite a few conversations with over the past couple months to get those in place. And then just really also Meta and Tallgrass for taking the time to try to get us information so we can make better decisions in the future. So thank everybody for that yesterday. Okay, so yeah, the last agenda item for us is just future meeting schedule. And for the Water Development Commissioners, the agenda is wrong. It says September 22nd through 24th. It should say 23rd and 24th because we've been able to consolidate those interviews with planning consultants to one day instead of two. So the information actually in the e-notebook says the 23rd, so that's accurate. And of course, the proposal packets you guys have just recently received should have a detailed calendar in there or a schedule for the different interviews and who's supposed to be where and when. Haven't showed up yet, Barry? Those have just got sent out, right? Or they're in the process. So they're probably in the mail or they will be showing up shortly. And if you have any questions on that, you can reach out to Barry. Of course, like every year, we're going to be down at the Capitol Complex for the interviews. And then the next day, we'll have the meeting to kind of firm up who the selections are here. Okay.
Okay.
And then, of course, the next time we'll see our Select Water Committee have a joint meeting is November 4th, 5th, and 6th. And that'll be up in Casper as usual. And that's where we are kind of bringing all of our new applications for construction and the recommendations, and then bringing in the dollar amounts and the budgets for the planning projects that we approved in May. So we can eventually then put together our next omnibus bills for planning and construction. Can't believe it's that time of year already. Seems like we just got finished. So anyway, any questions on that? Otherwise, I think we can adjourn.
Are there any questions for the director? All right, can I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Now, Select Water is going to come in and tell us what they're about.
I'd suggest we take a break to kind of regroup it, maybe start back at 10. That still puts us ahead of schedule, but we already had a scheduled break, I believe. Yeah, we had about a 15-minute break between the two, but
You want to do 9:50? That'd be
be,
15 minutes.
Yeah.
And we can get started early.
yeah,
Okay.
we're flying this morning. If you guys want to stay, I mean, I don't know if you want to stay in for the meeting or not, and I just want to give you a chance to or that's fine. Whatever.
Sorry, Madam Chair. It might be valuable, at least for the first topic, since it has a lot to do with small water program,
I was
for them to stay up there, and then they can talk microphones, and then maybe after that,
Yes.
if they want to move back to the audience, because it won't be so relevant to the program.
Yes, and I agree. I was just more, if people were not able to stay for that, that they would
yes.
have an opportunity to depart without everybody staring at them and wondering why they're leaving, but okay, 9:50 it is, we'll begin.
Okay.
I know.
Are we sliding over to letting them slide in?
We're going to sit here so we can use our microphone.
Committee, the portion of our meeting where we do our interim topics that have been approved by the Legislative Management Council. Eve, will you call the roll? Again? We got an addition online. She must not have her. Sorry.
This is roll call for the Select Water Committee meeting on Thursday, August 6th. Senator Crum. Senator Driscoll. Senator Grew. Senator Jones.
Here.
Senator Larson.
Here.
Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Chestick. Representative Fornstrom. Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Strzok. Vice Chairman Boner. Chairwoman Lawley.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Eve. The first thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the May 6th and 7th, 2026 meeting. Those were emailed out and they were posted online prior to the time the packet came out for this meeting, but I think every one of you received them. So if there's not any changes someone has to propose, I would entertain a motion to that we approve those minutes. Yes.
I move that we approve last meeting's minutes.
Representative JT Larson has made a motion that we approve the minutes from the May meeting.
Second.
I heard 2 seconds over here. I think Stacey Jones may have been first, Senator Jones. So we now have a motion on the floor, seconded, to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, minutes have been approved. That brings us to the first of our interim topics for this meeting, and it is the cost and administration improvements for water projects. And so we have water development up, and I think we have some friends that will come along as we work through this topic, but we'll let you take it off. Jason, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a reminder for everybody, when we were going through the legislative session last year, there was some an amendment to our omnibus water bill construction that requested that our office take a look at the small water projects program. So that's what we're going to talk about first. And then when we're done, this will be a little bit of a lengthy discussion. When we're done, we'll do a fairly brief and quick overview of our planning, construction, and dam and reservoir program in about maybe 15 minutes. Like this is the hard to see. So I will try to say next slide, even though I'm the one clicking it, so you know when to turn the page. But I can't make a guarantee that I'm going to remember that. So, all right. So, of course, this isn't working all of a sudden. Maybe I'll have to say next slide. It's on. Oh, I thought it was on. Yeah. All right. Next slide. Okay, so again, as a reminder, the legislation asked our office to take a look at the application and review process associated with the Small Water Projects Program and the timeframes associated with those, and as well as the costs. And I really want to just take a minute and say I do appreciate the opportunity to do this. And after going through this process, recognize the value in what we just did. I will say that when this program started, it was very much under a microscope. I don't think a lot of folks, legislators, our commission at the time, were super comfortable with the program. And I think since that time, obviously we're 20 plus years into the program now, that the program's matured. Those legislators that are still around, that were around at the beginning, and others, I think, have heard the success of the program, much more comfortable with it. I think the commission's comfortable with it. Our sponsors are comfortable with it. Our office, project managers and things that administer the program are much more comfortable with it. So with that, I will say that we've seen some opportunities to clean some things up and also to probably relax some of the oversight that we've been having over the years. And I think that strict oversight was really a result of that initial, I'll say, uncomfortableness or newness of the program and everybody getting used to how it's going to work and everything. So I think that is a bit of a relic of that. And again, but also because the theme is going to be, you'll hear, maybe we relax and put more of the liability on the project sponsors, which are typically conservation districts, and us not providing so much oversight. With the caveat of, we do have a range of sponsors. We have conservation districts that have engineers on staff, and we have conservation districts that are like half of an employee, you know. So there are going to be those folks that need more help, and we're still willing to help whenever we need to. And we have a lot more sponsors that have the experience they need, so we can always kind of point them in the direction of a certain other conservation district that have done these projects in the past, and they can get some help from them if they have questions too. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to have Jody go through what we do currently and why we do that. We also did a review of the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund to get an idea of how they complete their projects. They're a very efficient program, and I'm going to have Barry talk about that. We sent out a survey through the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts, and we appreciate their help on that, to all the conservation districts throughout the state. And again, that's typically our sponsors. Every once in a while, we'll have a different special district, like a watershed improvement district, but for the most part, it's conservation districts. Then I'll go through kind of the ideas on how to streamline the program, and we can have some discussion about that. And then if everybody's interested in pursuing those options, we can talk about what it would take to implement that in a time frame. Next slide, please. And if at any time you have questions, feel free to stop me. So again, a little bit of an introduction. The small water program actually started in 2002. I will say that it started as a pilot program or pilot status. And there was even a point in time getting back to, it was heavily scrutinized at the time. I think it was more or less put on hiatus or suspended in 2006 for a bit. And then after that, in 2008, 2010, 12 timeframe, it was kind of extended 2 years at a time. But again, much more comfort than we originally had. And really the purpose of the program is just to provide incentives for our local land management agencies and our private landowners to make improvements for watershed condition and function. And then you'll see, the typical types of projects, just as a reminder. I won't run through all those, but a lot of times we're seeing livestock watering type facilities are very popular. So that would be, wells, pipelines and troughs and storage tanks and things like that to improve grazing management and, improve riparian areas and all those things. So with that, we're going to get into next slide, what we do and why. And again, I'm going to hand this over to Jody. And if you have any questions or if there's any confusion, feel free to stop us.
Good morning. If at any point I go too fast and you have a question, don't hesitate to interrupt. That's the best place to catch them in the moment. So let's start at the top there. Applications are due November 15th of each year. And then I'm going to go through that image on the right. And I understand that you can't read it very well, but we'll kind of point to things generally, and that'll give you an idea. That is page 2 of the application. Page 1 is basically sponsor information, like what's the name of the project, who's the district that's applying. It's that kind of communication as far as the entity. So the real meat of the application is on pages 2 and 3, and we'll take a look at those today. So that first big box at the top that you see is a table on the application, and that lists the practices that are eligible. So the sponsor can then easily list the quantity, like we're going to put in 1,200 feet of pipeline and check the box whether it's, brand new or rehabbing an old one. And so that's kind of what the purpose of that table is. It gives us a list of what they're proposing to install as a part of the program. And then if you look on the far side there, those two boxes on the ends are for the lat long coordinates, and those are required. We have to have latitude and longitude associated with each one of these installations. Let's see. Section, township, and range, and that's an optional. Obviously, lat long's a lot tighter. It's a lot better record, but if they have section, township, and range, we include that as well because sometimes it's useful to have that as it relates to water rights. And then the last section there is the project description where they talk about what's being installed down to the specific practices and why it's installed and what they anticipate the need for that practice is. Could you go to the next slide, please? So this is page 3. That big section at the top there is the public benefit section. And each year when we do the recommendations, I copy that language exactly out of the PDF that I get. Like that gets copied and pasted without me making a single change. Put it in quotes and italics and put that in your recommendations so that when you guys are reviewing the public benefit of these projects, you know word for word what the sponsor on the ground has looked at and what they believe the public benefit of those projects are, because public benefit is an important constitutional requirement for this program. So then let's see, I can read my own project here. Public benefits. That's a little small. Oh, yes. The next section is project participants. So the project participants in this case would be, we anticipate getting technical assistance from NRCS, or we anticipate that we'll be needing Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resources Trust funding, or I have a project that I reviewed yesterday that had Fish and Wildlife Service funding. And so it just lists the different participants in the program, whether it be the district and the landowner, if it's a small project, or whether it lists Trout Unlimited and Ducks Unlimited and all the other funding sources. That's the list that we use to sort of anticipate how they've thought through the project and the cost of the project and how they're going to move it forward. The next two questions are who is the owner of the project and who owns the land on which the project is going to be built. That sounds counterintuitive, but many of the stock watering systems that we put in are put in by a leasee who does not own the land that the project is being built on. That is very common. So this gives us an opportunity to understand if we need to have some written documentation for the file to document that they're aware that this is happening on their property and they're okay with it. Like I joke with people, you wouldn't build a swimming pool on your neighbor's property without first saying that getting something in writing that says they're okay with it. So then we'll skip down. Question number 29 is what is the estimated total project cost? That lets us know about the scale of the project. And of course, our grant maxes out at $35,000. But if it's a $50,000 project, then that'll tell us that we need to put $25,000 towards the grant request. Let's see, the last section there is project readiness, and that is basically outlines whether or not they are seeking shovel-ready status and what they have completed as far as readiness for a shovel-ready designation. Then we have a question, and that's on the page that I didn't show because it's only half a page. And then we have a question for sage grouse, and we request a project location map. So that's the basics of the application. It's pretty streamlined. We don't put a lot of unnecessary things. It's a short application, and I've heard that it's relatively easy to complete. So after we receive the applications on November 15th, they all get a date stamp so that we know whether they made it in on time, and sign them in officially. And then me and Mabel, and last year Lonnie helped us too, review those applications for eligibility and installed components. So we'll compare that table to the description and talk to the sponsor if we need to make sure that we fully understand what they're proposing to do. Take a look at the location if it's a district that borders the state line, or if there's anything close to, when they're lapping over the edge from one district into another. We'll review it for location to make sure there's no concerns there. We'll take a look at the public benefit to make sure that it stands up to the scrutiny that is warranted for the program. We'll take a look at shovel readiness, and if they are seeking shovel ready status, then we'll do a full notice to proceed review on the documents to make sure that it's ready to meet that requirement. And we'll take a look at funding the project costs and funding partners. Nope, one more up. That's okay. One more up, one more. There you go. Lose track of where I'm at here. Okay. So project applications are assigned a priority based on the project's primary purpose. So in the criteria, you guys have probably all seen it many times. There's a list of priorities, and those priorities are not a one-to-one correlation to the eligible projects, but it'll be like source water development will get a number one priority. Well, source water development could be a well, or it could be a spring development, or it could be something else. So we'll take a look at the projects according to their primary purpose, and then we'll assign them a priority. And the purpose for that is, as we've seen in the last year or two, is to determine how many project requests we get and how much money we have, because there is differing amounts of carryover each year depending upon the workload that we've had, because each of these projects take 2.5 years to finish. So as we have projects rolled off, some money is returned to the accounts, and so we can reappropriate it for more small water projects, so that available balance kind of varies. And so we get the projects in, we come up with an amount, how much we think we're going to need to spend, and then we'll decide if we can fund them all or if there is a need to eliminate projects based on priority. And the way that works is we stop at the last fully fundable priority. So if we can fund all of the 4s but none of the 5s and 6s, then we'll cut it off at the 4s and not even try to make a decision on which 5s and 6s we're going to fund. We'll just cut it off at the last fully fundable priority. Okay, so applications that do not meet program requirements will result in a conference call with a project sponsor to amend or withdraw the application. And I always want to put the footnote on that. Let's see, I think we're up a slide or two. One more up. There you, nope, keep going. You're way back.
Sorry, I missed.
Oh, that's okay. Keep going, keep going.
You're going the wrong way.
Going down.
Go backwards.
Keep going. There's a little blue box at the bottom. Keep going.
One more.
One more.
There.
All right. Okay. So with the understanding that if there's a project that has issues, and here's a good example from last year. We had a sponsor in the Thermopolis area submit a request that was specifically requesting a Madison well. Well, I don't know a lot about geology, and if you hear me speak in that direction, you'll probably see George start squirming in the back of the room, as is appropriate. But that seemed like an unusual request for a program this size. And so we ended up calling the project sponsor and saying, we think you need to rethink this. George said he's not even aware that there is very much Madison in that area at all, and maybe it was not a reasonable request. And so we put a call into the sponsor. The sponsor met with NRCS. They revised the application and redrafted the request and changed the program application, and we got all that handled before it ever came to you. So we took something that was unlikely to be successful and to be very expensive on everybody's part, and we're able to get that turned around into an alluvial well that was in the formation near the river, and it was very likely to be successful, and we rearranged everything, and now everybody wins because the landowner gets the water supply that they needed, and they don't have to pay extra for something that's not likely to be successful. So we try to analyze it at that level if there's a need, and get them the opportunity to withdraw or an opportunity to reconfigure it so that it moves forward with a little more options for success. So all of that happens before that comes in. That looks like it concerns, and this is how we're going to recommend it, and make sure that they understand that this is the fairest and freest process in the world. They are welcome to sit here and make their case in front of you guys however they choose, and then it's up to the commission and Select Water to decide. Which and why on the application process. So the benefit is copied directly. We then send a copy of that to the project sponsor before the March meeting, so they are aware of what you guys will whether it's account 1 and account 2 and all the relevant stuff. And then we bring it to your attention for the March meeting. So looking at on that arrow, and they need to accept applications. If the applications are due from the district to us by November 15th, then frequently sponsors will request that they have landowner applicants by September so that they can have a chance to go out and make field visits and visit with the landowner and look for project funding and make sure the matches are there. So they have a lot of legwork to do. And we have worked quite a bit with our project sponsors to understand or to build them up in their understanding, and then they need to do those field visits and work with their capacity. So they are very good at that, and they take that responsibility very seriously. So then they vet the project and prepare the application for us, which is submitted November 15th. We receive it and sign it in, get it all stamped in so it's official. And then we review applications for eligibility and installed practices. We assign a project priority. Then if we need to, we'll make a call to the project sponsor if there's any issues with that. I have a database of all of the projects, and that's sort of, I get the applications in my email. I print them out and stamp them in so that I have one. This is the sort of legal copy that everybody works from. So this is the first instance when I take that paper copy and make it digital. And the database then becomes the sort of hub of the wheel that all the spokes come off of, because then I can build I put a record for each project in the database, and then from that database, I export to create the tables that you guys see for the March meeting. So that sort of gets one central hub that's got the information, and then it's all accurate, and we can go back and make sure that's always correct. And then we build recommendations, the maps that you guys see in the project agreements, and then all of that is sent out to the district board for the district's signature. I think that gets us to the next slide. So after the district's boards sign their project agreements to get them back to us, the sponsors can get started on the construction of their projects at that point. Technically speaking, if they are doing a shovel-ready project, they've already gotten some of the legwork out of the way, but it's at that point they get the signed documents, they can get started. This is, for better or for worse, probably one of the things we're most known for. This is our project sponsor checklist. The project sponsor checklist is intended to be an aid for project development and to facilitate communication between the sponsor and the office. It's intimidating when you look at the number of boxes on that list, but I would like to start by saying not all of those are required. But their presence on the list can help the sponsors think through what may be required before construction. And this is the point where we dive into the idea that we have different experience levels. Like Jason said, we have some districts that don't have a mill levy and they have one person that's part-time. And we have other districts that have a full mill levy and a full-time staff with several employees and a full-time engineer. So you've got across the board varying levels of experience. So this gives the sponsor something to talk through. If they have questions, they can call me and say, what is this and why do I need it? If they've got a full-time staff, then they can run through the list, check NA on the stuff that's not applicable and put the rest of the stuff in the package. But let's make sure we're all on the same page, what's required and what you might need. Might not, but you might. So that's the purpose of the checklist. Okay, next. Thank you. So notice to proceed review. After the sponsor gets all of that information submitted, I better adjust my notes here, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. And I can go through some of the details on that checklist if you like. It's, like I said, it's intimidating, but not all of it is required. notice to proceed. After the sponsor has gotten their notice to proceed, all the permits and plans and specs and all that kind of stuff put together, they bundled all it up, put the checklist on top and email it to me. And then I'll take a look at the checklist and I'll take a look at the plans and specs. With the note that I look at the plans at a very high level, very high level. I'm basically making sure that it passes the straight face test. Does this look reasonable? Is there anything that I see on this that gives me alarm bells? And if I don't see anything that looks like it's going to give me an alarm bell, it's done by NRCS or it's done by a professional engineer with a stamp. Okay, great. You've handled what you needed to handle and I roll on down the road. It is important that we have those drawings though, because individual components on that plan then becomes our agreement with the sponsor on what it is we're agreeing to pay for, because the information that's included in the application is a verbal description. We're going to put in a well and 2 stock tanks and we're going to provide water and all this is fantastic. That doesn't tell you what you're going to be paying for later. So the plans is our first real agreement, if you'll pardon the expression, where the sponsor says, this is what we propose to buy, and the commission says, yes, we approve these, this is what we agree to pay for. So as an example, it doesn't happen very often, but we'll get after photos in on a project that shows 6 solar panels for a well on the after photo, but I'll get an invoice for 8. And so I'll be like, okay, so whatever, you must have missed that. You need to subtract those out and resubmit the invoice. So it's important to get drawings that have enough detail, that have a list of installed components, so we can make sure that they agree and we agree what we're agreeing to buy at the time. We do review clearances and approvals with the sponsors that have less experience, like I said, just to make sure that they understand, have you thought that while it may not be obvious, you might want to check with this agency to see if they have a need for a permit on this project. It's not always obvious which permits are required and which ones are not. So sometimes I'll suggest maybe you ought to give them a call and see if they have an opinion, just to make sure. Also, landowner approvals are received at this step just to make sure we have something in writing. And I know Wyoming is really good neighbors with a lot of its citizens, and a lot of that stuff happens on the landowner side, where I know that guy, I've known him for years, we're good buddies, we see each other at coffee 4 days a week, and all of that's great, and he doesn't have thing, but not a problem. Is to make sure everything's handled. Okay, next slide. Oh gosh, it's flowing fast. There you go. Okay, so and I think I covered that already. This project sponsor checklist was designed to be filled out and signed right before the sponsor is requesting notice to proceed. Maybe it's just the way my mind works, but if I'm planning for a trip or if I'm planning for a project, a lot of times I'll just put a list together and think it through once, and then I'll go through and check things off the list to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So that was the idea behind the checklist, to make sure that they're not forgetting anything, that it's all ready and completed and in the package. And then we use the sage grouse analysis sheet to document the location of the project as it's related to sage grouse core area and individual LECs. And this allows us to provide guidance in the notice to proceed letter as far as timing for construction. So that arrow down at the bottom there, the sponsor's application, November 15th. And this arrow doesn't have a very locked in time frame on it, because it's very dependent on the individual sponsor. It's dependent on federal agencies in one part of the state are much more expeditious than they are in other parts of the state. So this timeline here is intentionally vague because it's different in Rawlins than it is in Powell. It's just the nature of the system. So like I said, applications November 15th, funding is approved in March. The sponsor signs the PAs. after we receive the signed agreements, we send out notice to proceed letters right away as soon as we receive the signed agreements on anything that's shovel ready. Then the design begins for everyone else. The notice to proceed package is submitted, and that timeline between when they start getting started on the process and when we receive the notice to proceed package, that can vary from, a few weeks, a month to a year or two. It depends on the sponsor. It depends on the federal agencies. It depends on a lot of things. After they submit the notice to proceed package, I'll review it, and then they can begin construction. After construction is finished, they submit a payment request, and the project itself, that last dot there, has 2.5 years following funding approval. So we approve in March of any given year. They get the rest of that year and 2 full years after that to complete the project. So then, next slide, then I issue a notice to proceed letter. That's one right there. That last paragraph is specific to the timing requirements for sage grouse and that kind of stuff, just to make sure that they have that in front of them. This is what you're looking at. And then after that, they, after construction is completed, they can submit a pay request for reimbursement. What we require for project completion for pay requests, next slide. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. We have a form that we produced in Excel, and it's not very complicated, but it's got a little table with some automatic cells that fill in so they can put in what they are requesting and the expenses over here, and that'll calculate the 50% over there. And then there's a certification and a signature and a test line on that. So we send them that file, so it's all ready to go. They have to fill that out. Like I said, we have to have after photos. Those are required by criteria, but also they're very useful when it comes to assessing what the finished product looks like. NRCS type as-builts. Now, I put it that way very specifically because for our traditional program, as-builts are a very labor intensive. We've got an engineer and he's got an office and he's drawing and redrawing and drafting and redrafting to make sure everything looks the way it did in the field. And that's important on the larger projects. On these projects, basically, we just need to document what you installed for the purposes of payment and records later on down the line. So the way these work is NRCS has a set of plans that they put together at the beginning of the project for their funding purposes. And they have a guy with a red pen and a clipboard. And he goes out to the field and he marks this and he marks that and he crosses that off and redraws the line over here and crosses that out. And then he does that all in the field when he's doing his inspection. And then the front page has a signature line and a date. And when he signs that signature line and the date, then it goes from being a beginning plan set to an as-built. So it doesn't require an extensive amount of redrafting or expensive amount of time in order to get one of those put together. But it does document an inspection by a neutral third party who's not receiving funding from the project. So it's a good documentation of the project's installation. Or in cases where they don't have NRCS to do the design, NRCS is spread pretty thin these days, we will allow a letter of certification from the engineer. So let's say you hired whatever engineering firm and they put your plans together as a part of that contract. They will come out and they will walk through the field to see the finished product, and they'll put a letter together that says, "Dear Jody, we have inspected the project. It's functioning in the manner that it's intended, and here's a few changes. The bird ramps are going to be installed in 2 weeks, but the project's working and water's flowing and everything's good." And then it's been inspected and I know what the changes are, and that will take care of the requirement as well. Then the sponsor has to sign the invoices. We require a UW6 from the State Engineer's Office for wells, just to make sure that that's been completed. That's a requirement that the driller, all licensed drillers have to complete those for every well. And then I will review that just to ensure that what we are paying for was the same as what we agreed to in the plans. And like I said, to make sure that we're not paying for 8 solar panels when we agreed that 6 was what was required to make the solar system work. So I review it for that kind of stuff. Let's see, next slide. Okay, ineligible items are removed. And this doesn't happen very often, and it's happening less often than it used to. And I can't say that I'm terribly disappointed about that because it's a lot of work. But if somebody chooses to do an in-kind project, meaning they've done the work themselves, that's fully allowed. They will then turn in the receipts for the items that they purchased. Occasionally you get stuff come in where they forget to subtract the personal items. Then we have our criteria that require wells that are drilled into proven and unproven aquifers provide proof of quality and quantity. So this is the part where you may see George squirming in the background, not a geologist. Early on, before we issue notice to proceed, we require a geologic report, and George reviews those to determine the level of risk, I think is the term he suggested, with the idea being it's not just the state's money, but it's the landowner's money as well. And so as a professional geologist who needs to take a look at this and see what is the relative risk to the parties involved to determine the success of this aquifer. And just because we determine that it is maybe not a great risk and we'll classify that as an unproven aquifer doesn't mean the landowner won't want to move forward with it anyway. With the understanding then that if they choose to move forward with it anyway, that they are taking the full risk of that well on themselves. If it's a proven aquifer, we're in it with them to the end because that's a safe bet and we've agreed to that. But if it's an unproven aquifer, then they're accepting the liability of that potentially risky development on their own shoulders. And we make that known to them up front. So if a proven aquifer comes back dry, typically, like I said, we're in that with them till the end because, yeah, if the well comes back dry, well, we're in that with them to the end. So we'll split the cost of those. We haven't had very many of those in my tenure here. I don't think we've had but maybe one or two in my whole 10 years. We're just not many of those. But if an unproven aquifer comes back, they'll submit a pump test and a water quality analysis, which we'll review to make sure that it meets the minimum needs of the project. And if the project, if it does not meet minimum standards for flow and quality, then they get to pay 100% of that cost. So that's the reason that we had that. We had that come up in Lincoln County specifically because apparently Lincoln County is never going to have a proven aquifer by the nature of the Wasatch Front. So they said, we don't want to be limited from the program. So how about you let us assume the risk and we'll do it anyway. So that's where that came from a bunch of years ago. And then next slide, I think that takes it on. Yes. So then we'll pay the bills and release the money and the project is closed out and we're done. And with that, I think it's Barry's turn.
So as you can see, we're very thorough. A lot of information there. So Barry, if you want to come up, we're going to talk next about we did some research. We sat down with the Executive Director, Bob Budd of the Natural Resource Trust Fund and kind of studied how they do the work. So Barry's going to briefly discuss that.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Select Water and the Commission. Let's talk about the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust. I think it's worth talking about for sure. And a couple things. One reason for sure is because it's an extremely successful program at getting projects on the ground. So what lessons can we learn? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that probably if you were to ask me what program is a small water program most likely to be compared with, it is the Wyoming Natural Resource Trust. It's always compared with that program. So let's talk about it a little bit. If we go back, I'll just give you a little bit of background, brief background here. The legislature created the trust in 2005. It is funded by revenue generated by a permanent account. And then the legislature can also appropriate additional funds for very specific purposes, and that has happened from time to time. Obviously, the purpose is to enhance and conserve wildlife habitat and natural resource values. And projects that fit within that mantra are eligible for funding. And to give you an idea, they're doing in the order of 70 to 100 projects a year. Okay, so very similar to what small water does. It's also worth noting that the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust is an independent state agency. They have a director and a grants manager, as Jason has just alluded to. They're governed by a 9-member citizen board appointed by the governor. Sound familiar? Kind of like the commission, 10-member. And then legislative oversight. Here again, kind of similar. They have a legislative oversight by the Select Committee on Natural Resource Funding. Next slide. So let's talk about the application process a little bit. Eligible applicants, applicants can be nonprofits or governmental organizations, and they can work with for-profit organizations if provided there's no allocation of financial resources to those for-profits. And then much like small water, they do have to, and we've already talked about the constitutional requirement, they do have to provide a public benefit. The projects water, March 1st and September 1st are their deadlines. For information to them and associated materials, they obviously description. Are in place already. What matching funds are in place or expect. Then supporting documentation, letters of submittal. But the big focus here is on project readiness. I just take that away, the big focus is on project readiness. Next slide. So if we look at their approval process, it's somewhat different. There's some similarities, but there's certainly some differences. Each application is reviewed and ranked by the WWNRT board. So the 9-member Citizen Advisory Board get all the applications. So that would be similar if we were to send out 70 to 100 applications to the members of the commission to give you a feel for what they do. So they actually review all those. Every every board member reviews those, and then those rank, and they actually rank all the applications that they get, and then that's aggregated in the office. And then obviously some projects are then selected for final consideration. And those that are selected for final consideration after the aggregation of all the rankings, they actually do site visits, and they stressed it multiple times to us, the importance of those site visits. So they take a subset of the board, a committee of board members, and I see some nods here, so I think some of you have probably been involved in this process, committee of board members and the director, prior to funding decision, go out on site. And they ask a lot of the hard questions out there in the field, okay? And it was alluded to us that basically those questions, sometimes it left some hanging questions that they had 2 or 3 weeks to follow up on and get that information into the office and so forth, and they did that. And then the board got back together, and I should tell you that through those site visits, and they made it quite clear that, what gets submitted as an application packet and then going on site and visiting them, that some projects may go up the list and some may go down the list, and based on those site visits. So that was pretty interesting. Then the board gets together, as I mentioned, and those that are not ready, they made it clear that those that are not ready to construct may be deferred to the next funding cycle. So here it is. It's all about readiness and timeliness of the project. The board itself meets in June and December. Remember, they have 2 batching deadlines, so they meet June and December after all the ranking and the site visits and so forth to make those final decisions. And then the funds are available the following month. So it would be July and January, and where they're completed, and where they have contracts, they're completed and executed, and that would be equivalent to our notice to proceed at that point. So they're off and running. So construction begins, and during construction and so forth, and during the project, there's progress reports and payment requests with invoices which are submitted to the office. And then payments are made. They can do partial payments and so forth as needed. And then unallocated funds that are allocated for the project but are not used are then returned back to the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust. And I think that's my summary, but I did want to say, and Jason already mentioned, a special thanks to Bob Budd, Director, and Hillary Wasserberger, a grants manager, for helping us and getting us up to speed a little bit on their program and spending the time with us. Yep.
All right, so next up we'll have Mabel.
Jason, I
Yeah.
just wanted to give a chance for any questions maybe that the committee or the commission have. Since for some of us that was a little bit new, that process. And I had one in particular, so I'll start out, and if there's others about this process. So you talked about deferring, if something's deferred, that it can be considered the next year. Would it be required that they do a new application the next year, or just somehow that application sort of stay open or live?
Right, Madam Chair, and I will speak to that. Actually, it's not next year. Remember, there's 2 batching deadlines.
Right.
So it's a 3-month process is what was explained to me. So it's really not next year, it'd be half a year at most. And my understanding, that stuff stays live. And that's there in the files and so forth with those questions that may need to be followed up on or whatever. They're not ready for prime time, but they could be taken up at the next subsequent meeting. And I know there's some folks here in the room that have probably done this much more and know more about it that could answer that question even better.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Thanks, Barry. I just was curious, how much money is available for granting for that they could put
There,
in for?
and thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Lisa and Solomon Dalton. I will let you know that they do get, we didn't talk about the large projects. There are large projects more than 400,000 that have to go through separate legislation to the legislature. Whereas these projects that we're talking about here, they actually get a budget through allocation through their budget bill, the state budget bill to their entity. My understanding, at least, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was about 8 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I think they have other pots of money too.
They do have other pots of money too. Yes.
So I would just follow up. I think it's tens of millions of dollars a year that they potentially put out in projects. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
All right. Good morning, Chairwoman Lawley, members of the Select Water Committee and the Commission. I'm Mabel Jones. I'm a project manager with Water Development Office, and I was asked to present information that we gathered from reaching out to members of the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts to understand the challenges that they may face with the program and whether there might be potential to requirements, including project or design review, and also to determine if applicants were experiencing applying for the program or completing projects under the program. So the question in 3 different general questions. There were the first to the program in the last completed the application. Do you find the application process burdensome? Has it caused excessive costs? And then do you have suggestions to streamline that process? The next set of questions related to the design review process. The design review process questions were defined in the survey to include our office's review of project designs, permits, specifications, operation and maintenance plans, all those things that Jody went through. And so the questions there kind of mirror the questions in section 1. Do you find the design review process burdensome? Has the design review process caused excessive costs? And then do you have suggestions to streamline that process? And then finally, section 3 included general questions. What do you think functions well with the program? Do you have suggestions to improve the program? And is there anything else you'd like to add? So our target audience for this was the conservation district, since they're the most frequent flyers with the program. We sent the questionnaire out to the districts via the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. Initially, we got a response rate of 19 districts, which was slightly over half of the districts. And then staff reached out and called those we hadn't heard from. And our final response rate, we got heard from 28 out of 34 of the districts, which we felt was really a good response rate. So stay on this slide, I guess. We did ask the question of those. So of the 28 conservation districts who responded, 22 of those had used the program. And just to share the information, the reasons for not using the program was that the staff had not been with the conservation district for very long, or they were not aware of the program. The districts might use other funds such as NRCS funds. They lack staff capacity. One of the district mentions they don't have a mill levy. They barely can keep the doors open and add additional administrative duties that the program would require. And then also another reason that folks had not used the program is they had not had requests for landowners. So go ahead.
That brings a question to my mind. With the district, so yeah, you got 28 of 34, 6 didn't apply. Of the 6 that didn't reply, are those also districts that didn't apply?
There was, we did hear from most of the districts that have used the program a lot replied. There was one district that was in the top 10 of our users that did not reply to the survey, and they just said they didn't feel that they had anything to add. So the other districts that, so we heard from the people who most frequently use the program. And Medicine Bow Conservation District initially didn't reply, and they had been a frequent user of the program. And so I called and twisted arms a little bit and said, we really need to hear from you. So, yeah. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Well, I guess the 6 districts that didn't apply, and then the additional 6 that didn't reply, my concern is that we have a very concentrated focus on where these grants are awarded, and just solutions to try to bring the other people into the fold where they can realize the benefits.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So next slide. So, so we'll be focusing on those 22 users of the program that we heard from. And the first question was whether they felt that the application process was challenging or burdensome. 6 of the folks that had been users of the program said yes to that. I think one thing that may have occurred with this question is that the respondents were not just focusing on the application, they were thinking about the whole process. And that was based on some of the answers whenever we asked to explain why. They started talking about the whole process rather than just the application process. But of those who said yes, some of the reasons they felt it was burdensome was coordinating all required documentation between entities such as landowners, permitting agencies and contractors was challenging. Paperwork and documentation is extensive, but understand the necessity and have figured out how to manage it was another comment we heard. We heard the application is simple, but the challenge can be the upfront costs such as engineering prior to knowing if they were going to be funded for the project. And then there was also a suggestion that put the notice to proceed process in the application, shift the burden of determining permitting requirements such as NEPA to the applicant. So that was another suggestion we heard. Of those who said no, 7 respondents indicated the application was straightforward compared to other funding applications. And then also we had a no, but the biggest obstacle is lack of engineering capacity or access to engineers within the conservation district. The next question related to the application was, did the application cause excessive costs for the applicant? And folks who said yes indicated that costs in the form of staff time associated with project coordination, communication, documentation, and assisting landowners through permitting requirements can become significant. Again, I think that's another one where they were kind of confusing the application, pack one, or not addressing whether the application was causing excessive costs, but looking at that whole process, because it was getting into the permitting requirements and that type of thing. And then engineering costs, again, were mentioned that they could be an issue. Of those who said no, we heard that the applications were time consuming, but there were no extra costs associated with it. And then opportunities, we asked if they saw that if there were opportunities to streamline the application process. It was mentioned to increase Water Development Office staffing to help with that. One district suggested to make everything shovel ready, and that way the applications are just reviewed at one time by our office. We don't have to go through those multiple steps. And then 12 of the 22 users had no suggestions or indicated the application process has worked well. So on to the next question. This related to the design review process, whether that was challenging or burdensome. Again, those are those kind of those steps that Jody discussed in her presentation. This was one of the areas where it stood out that more of the districts felt that there were challenges. 12 of the 22 users of the program indicated challenges. That included that the reviews have lag. One comment was that not probably due to lack of Wyoming Water Development offered effort, but maybe lack of staff. And then also that the lag can come on the conservation districts or the applicants' end. Also indicated that it might be nice to have more confirmation emails of where their project is in the process. So they know where they're at, they know where they're at in the queue and when things might be approved and notice to proceed issues. Again, we heard that theme that review of engineering designs and the project packages by our office creates delays and additional expense. Staff designs are sometimes questions by our office, creating delays and extra costs. And conservation district acquisition of permitting requirements is difficult. And our office may be taking on the jurisdiction of other agencies by reviewing all those permitting requirements. It was mentioned time is money and construction seasons are short. So those lags create delays. And then of those who said no, we heard from 5 respondents that the process is long, but reasonable and not burdensome, and the thoroughness is appreciated. In terms of opportunities, let's see, I guess on the next one, in terms of whether that design review process creates excessive costs. Again, engineering costs were mentioned, that those require extra costs, especially if design revision is required. It was mentioned that NRCS often helps with engineering, but due to policy changes, this service may be less available. And so the districts are having to incur more of those costs. And those who said no, one of the comments was that with good engineering and attention to detail, no costs are incurred. And then also districts indicated that they had used the Small Water Project Program Award to pay for engineering because that is a covered cost. Finally, opportunities to streamline for the design review process. Comments or is recommended to reduce our office checks on engineering designs and review of permitting documents and put the liability and burden on the applicant. Add additional staff. And then 9 of the respondents had no suggestions for streamlining the program or the design review process. And so final 3 questions. Next slide. Question, what do you think functions well with the program? The payment process is efficient. The overall process works well. We heard that from 3 of the users of the program. Communication responsiveness, clear guidance and technical assistance provided by the project manager or the program manager was indicated by 5 respondents. It puts tax dollars back into communities and gets projects on the ground. We heard that from 5 of the different respondents. And 1 respondent indicated they appreciated the thorough review process because it keeps them out of trouble. And then suggestions to improve the program, speed up review processes. We should be a granting agency, not a project manager, project reviewing agency. Again, additional staff was mentioned. And then no improvements recommended. 6 folks suggested that. And then the final slide This includes some of the key themes that we heard across all of the questions. Try to go through these quickly, but I thought there were some good things to just kind of summarize. One of the key themes related to program utility and impact. And the program provides essential funding and incentives that enable important local water resource projects, support improved livestock water availability, watershed health, and rangeland management. This is viewed as an effective tool for economic stimulus and community investment. The design review bottleneck was heard as a challenge across a lot of the questions. It's frequently cited as the most time-consuming step. Respondents suggested that requiring stamped engineering designs increases costs and delays, and reviewing already stamped designs is seen as redundant. However, while the review is challenging, the thorough review was often cited as necessary and appreciated. Design and engineering costs, I think we heard that as I was going through each of those individual questions, that was brought up as a challenge. In terms of support and communication, one of the themes that we heard is that staff are highly regarded for their responsiveness, expertise, and willingness to assist throughout the application reimbursement process. And that communication is vital for resolving issues and managing projects. And then there was also a kind of a theme that there could be additional outreach for program awareness and outreach for those districts that were not aware of the program, and where staff had limited awareness of the program, to increase that outreach. And then in terms of staffing, many suggested additional office staffing during peak workload times as a solution to streamline the notice to proceed and billing processes. So then I think ideas and efficiencies, one of the things we heard was make projects all shovel ready, and not put the NEPA now review on our office, and then increase communication, letting people know where their project is at in the process. So went through a lot pretty quickly. So any questions on that survey? And just appreciate the assistance of Holly Kennedy with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts, getting that out to her folks. Yeah. So,
thank you. Thank you for your work on that.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I realize a lot of information here now that I'm hearing it. So, but anyway, this is where the rubber is going to meet the road. So if everybody can pay attention. All right. So options to streamline. And again, keeping in mind that what I've already talked about, people are much more familiar with the program. The comfort level has increased drastically. The feedback we heard from our conservation districts in the surveys, and really this theme of let's not provide so much oversight, let's put that responsibility back on the sponsor, which I think we've heard. But ultimately, it's a policy decision by these two bodies, I think. So next slide. All right. So with that in mind, I think the biggest piece of feedback we heard, and also talking with Senator Hicks, who his conservation district that he recently retired from, used this program a lot, and I've had several conversations with him. So that biggest piece is really that review time from the time the agreement is signed after the session at the March meeting, and when you get notice to proceed to go to construction, because we do require them to send in all their permits and drawings and landowner agreements and all that stuff, and we're checking that. And if they don't get it all sent in, and we're kind of having back and forth, and it does take some time in some instances. So with what we have here for option one, really the application, obviously, the deadline doesn't change, still November 15th. But essentially what we're talking about, and these are projects that aren't shovel ready, just for a heads up on that. So once the agreement is signed in March, then what we would require would be a drawing of sufficient detail. So we want to know where it is, what's going to be installed, so the project components, who, is it on BLM land, is it on private ownership, what is it? And then a table of quantities for each one of those project components. So then that allows us to understand what are we paying for in the end when we get that. And usually it's a final pay request. We don't get a lot that are monthly pay requests. So we can make sure everything's eligible and that we have a common understanding of what's going to get paid for in the end. And then instead of all this notice to proceed package of you send in all these permits and agreements and everything else, again, shifting that liability back to the sponsor. And what we would have would be a simplified checklist. Jody referred to the checklist earlier that can be daunting, but it's there to really help people think through all the things that might be needed. We would have a simplified checklist that kind of covers, the different types of permits and different things that could be needed. The project sponsor would go through and check when they've got all those that are required. Some of them are not going to be applicable. And then all they need to do is send that in. It's going to be signed by them, and we would turn around and give them the notice to proceed. So instead of them sending this big package, and when we review everything, it's just the honor system. Excuse me. They check the boxes that are required. They fill it in, signed, and a notice to proceed is given. And then construction may begin. The project payment is going to be pretty much the same as what Jody described, where an appropriate land management agency would certify when the project's done that it's operating as intended. We've got in here that should be an independent land management agency. So maybe the BLM does it. If they have an engineer that they hire to design some of this, the engineer could turn around and say, yep, it's functioning, good to go, just like we thought. Go ahead and process the payments. Next slide. Just to address the shovel-ready piece of this, it would be exactly what I just said, except when the application comes in, they would provide that affidavit or checklist that's signed that, yep, we've got all the permits we need, we've got this, we've got that. Sign it, send it in with your application and the drawing that I mentioned that has enough detail for everybody to understand the project components and the quantities and all that stuff. Essentially shovel ready. We turn around, and when the agreement comes in March, that agreement would be the notice to proceed. So we'd have a little language in those particular shovel-ready agreements. And as soon as those are signed, they can begin construction. Okay, so it saves, I think, time and effort, money from having to gather up all those things and provide them to our office, and our office reviewing them, and the back and forth of when they don't have all the pieces of paper. We're going to put that responsibility back on the sponsor. Next slide. We talked briefly about proven and unproven aquifers. And again, as mentioned, to prove an aquifer, we require a geologic report from the sponsor, and then we review that. And of course, that takes some time and money on their behalf to do that. So again, to reduce that effort, what we're suggesting, and we've heard through the survey also, that let's just say they're all unproven, and we put that, again, that liability is back on the sponsor. And if they drill a dry hole, we're not going to pay for it. If it's successful, we'll pay for it, rather than kind of giving that reassurance of, if it's in an area that doesn't have a lot of wells and not a lot is known about the aquifer that they're drilling into, that we would, well, we already would say that's unproven, sorry. But the proven aquifer, if they drilled a dry hole now, we would basically compensate them 50%. So suggestion, let's just make them all unproven, or basically the liability's on the sponsor. If it's dry, we don't pay for it. And if it's successful, we do. Next slide. Oh, and I had one more thing on that last one. Instead of requiring the water quality testing and to ensure that it's going to, be suitable for livestock watering in most instances, we will just encourage that and leave it up to the sponsor, because that can be another expense, obviously, too, with testing. Next slide. And then, of course, with any kind of consideration, or you can consider doing things the way we currently do them. Next slide. So now I would like to have, I guess, some discussion, or at least some questions about our proposed potential changes, if you like those. And if you don't have any questions, I can jump right into kind of how we would implement that stuff.
Okay, first of all, let me just thank you, Jason, and your team. It was a lot of information, but it was good and relevant and helpful, and I think you organized it in a pretty good way, considering how much there was, but I appreciate that. Any questions? I see Senator Guru down there.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jason, question I have is, you talked in the presentation about talking to Bob and with the Natural Resource Trust, and I did shake my head. I was on that committee for a while. It's all really interesting, and it's a lot like this, where a lot of faith and trust is put in the board by the elected officials to do a lot of the groundwork and heavy lifting, and then we get in here and we kind of follow your lead as far as, approving this, small projects and large ones in this case. But it was the same thing with that, and then a lot of trust with the staff was, involved with that too, and what really makes it work. My question is, after you did the survey from all the conservation districts, did you go back to Bob and ask about, okay, these concerns are raised, if there were similar concerns with the small projects that they were doing in WNNRD, whatever it is, to see how that shook out? Like if it was proven not a problem once they got it rolling with the program, that some of those fears went away from the applicants, or maybe they were true and then they made changes.
Yeah.
Did that discussion occur?
Madam Chair, Senator Grew, we did not have that discussion. That is a good idea. I believe they've pretty much done things the same way the whole time. I don't think they have a lot of problems. There's just a lot of communication when things do come up, so there's no surprises, in my opinion. So
follow up.
Yes, Senator Guru, please.
That was what I recalled too, and so I'm not, not giving you a hard time about not going back to it, but that was what I recall. Was there were a lot of questions when the project started, but a lot of those fears kind of went away as everyone kind of got the feel for it, and it's a lot more upfront work for you, I know, to be able then when the applicants come, especially with engineering costs and everything else, that that they're going to have faith that, and a lot of direction from the commission too about what works, what doesn't, and so that way they know before they go into investing a lot of money that they're on pretty good footing with us, and we've been able to do that here too, I think.
Yeah.
And I know I'm sure that Senator Hicks may have some comments on that too. I'll look forward to. Thanks.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, I would say, if we go down this road, we'll learn from it. And if we need to make adjustments in the future, we can. But I'm fairly confident something like this could work. So.
All right. Any other questions? Or yes, sir. Commissioner Cott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, just to clarify, in the existing process, we required engineered stamp drawings. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cott, I do think that's correct. And that's been some criticism over the years, I think, over that as well. An instance is a stock pond. Why do we require stamped engineering drawings when the state engineer's office doesn't? And that's part of the reason why I said this was a good review. And realizing, and I actually looked into that further with our Attorney General and looked at the rules and the statutes associated with the Board of Engineers and Surveyors, which sits right here next to us. And it's a little bit unclear, but I think we came to the conclusion that we could probably handle this just like we would handle permits and put that responsibility back on the sponsor. There are probably instances such as a small stock pond, less than 20 acre feet or 20 feet in height, that probably don't need to be designed by an engineer. When they start getting bigger and they fall within a different jurisdiction of the state engineer's office, especially safety of dams, but there's kind of some in-betweens, then maybe they do. And a lot of our sponsors are probably going to know that. Again, that gets back to my comment. The less experienced sponsors, we will still be here for them if they have questions about that. And I would say similarly in regards to if they're not public works, which, a lot of our municipal type projects are public works, right, for the general public. And, if we have a pipeline with troughs and tanks and things like that on it. That's not a public work. It's not for the general public to utilize, right? It's for a lessee. And so while it might be good practice, if again, we have a less experienced sponsor and some of that stuff you can fill out, there's NRCS kind of cookbooks for those types of things. Maybe it's in their best interest to get somebody if it's, a lot of drop and elevation change so we aren't imploding pipes or blowing up pipes and different things like that with pressures. But probably not the responsibility of our office to require those things. So I'd say, again, getting back to what I suggested, bare minimum is we need that drawing so we can understand what it is we're paying for, how many of this and that, widgets and weasel dabbits when we get that final pay request. And there's opportunity along the way too, when they realize, hey, that's not going to quite work right, or we may need, another solar panel. And that's kind of a more formal change order process with our office. So we're on the same page and the communication continues. So sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer.
So, Madam Chairman,
Go ahead.
so that was part of my question, but thank you for that answer. So maybe one thing about an engineering stamp, there's a certain amount of assurance with health and safety that comes with that stamp. And so you do away with the stamp, or at least on our end, you're saying, we're pushing that health and safety responsibility almost totally on that district. Maybe in their application or in their permit, make them sign off that they're assuring health and safety is addressed and will be complied with and provided for. Because an engineering stamp holds a lot of weight with different things. And if we eliminate that, how do we fill that gap, I guess is my question.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, Commissioner Cott, we currently on that checklist that Jody said couldn't be daunting, have kind of there's a signature line and there's also kind of a disclaimer that it's really their responsibility to follow laws, statutes, et cetera, et cetera. But I also did kind of just with that same thought in mind, I ran through, okay, what projects are we talking about? Small reservoirs I just addressed. Stock ponds, essentially, when they get bigger, then, safety of dams requires some of those things. But wells, solar platforms, pipelines and conveyance facilities, springs, guzzlers, and I say spring developments, water or wetland developments, erosion protection, stream bank, windmills, aren't going to be raised to the level of safety concern.
I mean, there is a safety concern and you are responsible.
Case situation depending on the project. Yeah. Yep.
It looks like Senator Vice Chair Boner has a question.
Yeah, thank so make it very clear to the project sponsor that they're responsible. We don't have to be, their mommies and daddies, frankly, they can get a stamp drawing if they want. I think we could probably, go more down that path, and that's my understanding of the path that we're going down. And I guess my question is, you say no amendment to existing legislation, but you say maybe in future legislation. I just wondering if you can clarify what that meant. Is that a non-codified law, maybe in a water bill? What were you thinking there?
Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. Okay, so
Before we get to that, just make sure any other questions before we move on to this part of the topic. I just want to make sure, and also online, just so we've covered where we are before we move forward. Great question by Vice Chair, but I want to make sure we're not getting ahead of other people. Eve, online, any of the legislators online, do they have any questions or hand raised? Okay, thank you. And I think Representative Forsman.
Have you internally discussed the implementation of option 1 and how that might impact the number of applications? Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah.
Have you discussed the implementation of option 1A and how that might impact overall number of applications.
Mr. Chairman or Madam Chair, we have not, but I don't anticipate, I guess, any additional applications because of that. Yeah. And I want to refresh my memory, I guess, on what I specifically said on 1A before I. Now, when I say 1A, that's the proven versus unproven aquifer. Yes. Okay. It could, I guess, because they don't want to take that risk. Essentially, the risk is going to be put back on the landowner paying for the project. Because essentially we're passing through projects through conservation districts to landowners in some instances, lessees in some instances. A lot of times there are other funding partners involved. So maybe if we could hold off on that answer, I think when Senator Hicks comes up and talks, he might have a better perspective on that. Is that fair? Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions before we kind of move on and go back to the vice chair's question, which was again a good one, but just wanted to clear up where we were. Seeing none, I will say this as a reminder to Select Water Committee that this was the interim topic for us, and the topic is that we look at what's being done, understand that, and consider ways to streamline. It doesn't mean we have to decide we're going to streamline, but that was the topic and what we're doing. So please do think about, as we're going through this, what do we feel will streamline and protect and ask these questions, because I think it's really important for us as an important topic we had for this interim. So, all right, can we go back to Vice Chair Boner's question and then move on through the process?
All right. So I think we'll answer your question as we run through this slide. So in regards to statutes, the question was, what changes are going to be needed to implement these three options, or option 1 and 1A? So we believe that the statutes, and originally there was a statute that we kept amending over time from 2014. We would just add money to it. Over the last couple of years, we thought that doesn't make a lot of sense. And we oftentimes get questions about why are you spending 10 million or 14 million on small water? And we'd always have to explain, we're only adding $1 million to the original appropriation, and it just kept building over time. In actuality, we were spending that out every year. So over the last couple of years, as part of our omnibus construction bill, we have a section in there, and it's small water new development and small water rehab. And basically we're asking for, like last year, we asked for $1 million for the new development side of things and $500,000 for the rehab. And we feel like the language in there, or the language in the past, is broad enough that to implement this new process, we wouldn't have to go back and change anything in the old legislation, but there could be some cleanup in the new legislation. And an example would be, we have special conditions, for example, for each of the small water, the new development. And one of them says, an appropriate land management agency or resource management entity shall certify that the proposed small water project will meet expectations and that appropriate engineering standards as approved by the commission will be adhered to. So that alludes to engineering standards. And it alludes to certain entities being able to certify that the project is functioning as intended. So we thought we could probably make that language a little more clear in the future. So it's little things like that as far as statutes, and they are non-codified in the past and in the future, I guess, too. As far as criteria, of course, we would need some criteria changes. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. The rules are super short, and it's in delegation of duties of our rules. And again, talking with the Attorney General's office, I'm not going to go through the explanation, but the thought was that the wording is broad enough that we within that wording with these new changes. And so that's a good thing because rule changes tend to be a little lengthy. Application, again, there's still some references to watershed studies and things like that in there from previous days. So some cleanup and clarification on those. Project agreements, again, there's references in there about these notice to proceed packages that we receive now. And again, some cleanup and simplification of those and making sure there's enough language in there about, liability being on the sponsor. I think that's probably already in there at this point too, with all the general provisions. The checklist affidavit going to be similar. Like I said, we would simplify that. The checklist we have already has that kind of disclaimer at the bottom that it's your responsibility. So that'll largely be the same, but probably shorter. The guidance document that Jody put together years ago, again, that's going to need to be kind of wholesale change on that. And then we have a flow chart that you kind of can follow on our website. It says, if this, then go to this step. And if not, go to this step and we can amend that. So next slide. So my recommendation is if the bodies want to move forward with this, would be that obviously the legislation from last year required us to have a report into the Select Water Committee by November 1st. So we would put that together, kind of a written version of what we presented to you today and some of the feedback we received. A copy of the presentation would be in the report, a direction that you provide us here shortly, and then an appendix that would include some of those documents that we talked about that would need to be changed. So kind of an updated criteria. We can do that and track changes. It might get a little messy. And then same thing, similar with application, project agreement, checklist. We put that in the amendment or the appendix of the report. And then if you so choose at the November meeting, you can have looked at that. And if you like everything, you can give us your blessing to go implement. And what we would attempt to do would be, it's going to be a little hard to get all these documents, rewritten and put up on our website and the word out by November 15th, which is going to be just, a week and a half after our commission meeting, our Select Water Commission meeting in November. So the thought would be we'd have applications come in November 15th. We're going to have that time frame from November 15th all the way to March, where we have to go through legislative session to get funding, and then we're signing agreements in March. So during that time, we would try to get the word out to our sponsors. Maybe we have a webinar that say, hey, we're in this transition period. We're going to be doing this in the future. Therefore, maybe they can start working on some of those, or if they have, I guess we would try to implement it next year in practice. Our reviews would be a lot shorter. It would be that affidavit instead of this package coming in and putting it in the file and all those things. So we'd essentially implement it, but it wouldn't be until November 15th of 2027 until, maybe all the documentation and everything is online and everybody's hopefully more comfortable with the new process, but we'd try to roll it out as soon as we can. And then also kind of make it somewhat retroactive on some of the projects that are already in the process. So I believe that's all I have. I think the next slide says questions. So.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Jason, I'll start with a question and we'll see some of the wrap up. I've sensed from the other questions that some concern by the group that language is very good about, that protects and it kind of makes clear that this obligation is clearly on them. I know the current application has that language, but would you consider, or would it be useful for the statutory language you're suggesting be tracked somehow on that application as well? Like we tie it to the changes we're making about what's required.
Yeah.
So there was clarity and some consistency in what we're going to put in the statute versus and what they're acknowledging they know is their responsibility or they have done. Because again, we're really talking about an affidavit versus an application, which an affidavit makes attestations. I did this, I did that, or this, or this, and is a slightly different kind of document. And I do think that it suits itself well to address the concerns that we've kind of heard, not really saying that what we currently use is insufficient, but with the change of the process, I think we do need to capture very kind of clearly what was expected and what they are saying when they sign it has been done. So
Madam
those are
Chair.
some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want to confuse, an application is still going to be required, but instead of this big notice to proceed review, that's where kind of this, and I'm calling it affidavit, just to kind of make it sound like it's pretty official, right? You're going to sign it. It's your responsibility. The checklist that we currently have has language such as acquisition of all permits, design certificates, and approval is a responsibility of the project sponsor. Please review the checklist above and sign below to indicate your agreement that all necessary permits, approvals, and the certificates have been obtained. So, and I failed to print it off, or it might be somewhere in this pack of stuff that I have so much I can't find things now. But I did work with Patrick, and he actually proposed some language that we could insert into kind of new legislation to clear some of that stuff up that I mentioned a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I think it does make sense that you mimic that same language in, say, an affidavit or an application or whatever it might be.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you. Other questions before we have a visit with good Senator Hicks? Questions? All right, seeing none, and I don't see any online either. I don't know if we've officially welcomed you guys from online, but happy to see you. Good to see you. So I guess we'll have Senator Hicks come and join us. Always good to see you, Senator.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Select Water Committee and members of the commission. I appreciate you staying here today to hear this discussion. I think at least the members of the legislature, this requirement to go through this, evaluate the program was an amendment that I put on in the water bill in the Senate, and it was adopted by both houses. And that's why we're here today. But it's important to understand how we got here and why I felt compelled to do that. First, I want to tell you, this is probably, I won't say probably. I worked 35 years for a conservation district, recently retired. And I will tell you that the Small Water Project program was the most substantial program that we ever had the opportunity to implement. I don't know. And our conservation district includes about a third of Sweetwater County and about a third of Carbon County, and probably the most arid portion of the state of Wyoming. But it's not only the ranchers that have directly benefited from the program, it's the wildlife, because we've done a substantial number of projects with small water, a stream bank stabilization, wetland development, stock water for both wildlife and livestock. It's increased our tourism, it's increased the resilience of our game herds, and overall it's had a huge, and I'm going to say this again, probably the most substantial economic impact to that portion of the state of Wyoming than any other program than my 30 years working in a conservation arena that we've ever implemented, because it is so multiple faceted and so far reaching. So consequently, we're a big fan of the program. And I think many of you that have been on this commission for a while understand that, approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 40% of all the projects completed have been in that area. Not only have we done them in our conservation districts because of our technical capacity, we've also facilitated and sponsored projects in other conservation districts that have joined us. Sweetwater, we've done one in Proposia. We trade back and forth. So it is a tremendous program. And the intent was, with this amendment to the water bill, was to strengthen the program, expedite the delivery, and emulate some of the other successful programs that we have in the state of Wyoming. Like all programs, it's always a good time to come back and review. I appreciate the work that the office has done here and reaching out. This has kind of been an ongoing theme from 2 years ago. There was a directive from the governor to take a look at the program for different reasons, but also, so I am a tremendous fan of the program. So a little background, just so you understand where I'm coming from and why I think this is so important. So I first started in the process of developing a program like this in my capacity as a Conservation District resource specialist in 1996. We filed an application with the Water Development to construct 32 small dams and reservoirs. The commission decided that they wanted to move rather than we filed to go to construction. They said, whoa, 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 just slow down here. We want to do a level 2 study. That level 2 study was completed in 1998. The commission then appropriated $2.8 million to start the construction. So this was the pilot project before the pilot. It was then after a series of constructing a number of these reservoirs that Select Water and the Water Development Commission come over and toured those facilities. These were fairly what we call large multiple use stock ponds. They were large enough to facilitate cold water fisheries that the Game and Fish Department stocked a number of these to design that public recreation, multiple beneficial uses. As a result of that, in 2002, they had officially adopted and started the small water program. So I've been involved with the development of this program since 1996 all the way through, and it's near and dear to my heart. Yeah, because it's made such a tremendous impact. And so the intent is to make something good a hell of a lot better. And I think many of the legislators have had an opportunity to send on the Select Natural Resource Funding Committee with the trust fund. And it's kind of the gold standard, but why do we look to the trust fund and why did I want to try to direct the program more like that? And the reason is when we look at the programs, they're both great programs. But we have one program that their annual budget that just spends off the interest income on the trust is a little around $8 million. But the legislature, we funnel every other thing into the Wildlife Trust Fund. We spent $40 million in fire recovery restoration 2 years ago to take care of all the elk fire and all the fires in Campbell County. They had a $40 million budget plus their money budget. So industry, Pacific Court comes and says, we're required to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 8 or $20 million in mitigation for all the transmission lines. Where's that money go? That goes into the Wildlife Trust Fund. They have administered up to $40 to $60 million in contracts and hundreds of contracts a year. And they do it with 2 people. And so when I look at that and say that we're both doing natural resource stuff, the Small Water Project program, and yet we have another program that's doing similar and some bigger projects and a little different scope, but it's the efficiency. And so when I looked at these two and started to boil down the real fundamental differences is how can we get more efficient for both the sponsor and the state? How can we free up some adjacent staff time to dedicate to other things? And how can we better deliver the program, increase the efficiency and the utilization of the program and reduce the cost of the sponsors and also the state? And so that was the rationale from this. I think the agency has done a good job. I would tell you there's another program that we need to look out there that almost is very similar to the Wildlife Trust Fund that's been around longer than that. Now, it's not very widely utilized, and that's through this Office of State Lands and Investment, and it's called the Trust Land Preservation and Enhancement Account. TP&E is what they call it over there. They do the exact same thing. And so in my capacity, in 35 years of my job, I've used all of these programs. We've done, tens of millions of dollars with the Wildlife Trust Fund, probably pushing way past 100 projects with small water. We do a lot of projects on state land with the Office of State Lands, and we drill water wells and we build stock ponds. And their process is a lot different than water development. And so let me characterize, and I think I'll just use the example that was brought up was a stock pond. And so we do stock ponds. We finished, I think, 9 stock ponds with the Office of State Lands and Investments last year. And there's an application. They take that application, they take that to the SLIB board, which is our top 5 electeds, and then they approve that based on the application. And then they issue a contract to the Attorney General's office, just like we do with the Wildlife Trust Fund, just like we do with the other programs. The minute that we sign that document, that's our notice to proceed. just like it is with the Wildlife Trust Fund. Now, the Wildlife Trust Fund's a little more different from a standpoint as they ask a lot more upfront questions and they do the on-site. SLIB, typically their staff come out after the projects and do some follow-up inspection, not on 100%, but probably about a 10 to 20% spot check on those, just to check and make sure. So what I'm trying to say is, look, we got 3 programs in the state of Wyoming. 2 of them operate pretty similarly. And I think there's 1 employee in SLIB, and it's about an $800,000 a biennium program that the legislature puts in the TP&E account. So my intent, and I think the intent of all of us, is if we've got something good and we can make it a little better and get better utilization, and keep in mind, we're talking small projects here. $35,000 match up to 50%. And so I think the agency's taken a great opportunity to move in the right direction. I still have a few concerns. I've expressed these with Jason in the discussion. I worry about the things like submitting detailed design work to the point where it starts to slow the process down and again, takes staff time. So let me articulate that just a little bit. So until we actually, and the devil's in the details, if we discuss what does that actually mean? So the state engineer's office has a jurisdiction over ponds, wetland ponds, stockwater ponds, municipal waste, they're not DEQ, but any of those type of impoundments. And so when I submit an application to, say, the Wildlife Trust Fund to go construct a 15-acre wetland pond that's 8 foot deep that has a capacity of 19.8 acre feet of water, we don't have to submit any designs for that. We're going to construct a pond. In the pond, we will, in the budget that we submit with the application, it'll be for materials and contractors, labor, any of those other expenses. So it's a lump sum type of thing. We can break that out. That would be, I would prefer us to see that kind of information up front in the application so the staff can review those and get an idea. But at the end of the day, it's 50% of the eligible cost. And so if you're doing a stock pond, obviously you're going to have a pipe and a water control structure and emergency, all that stuff apperent to that. And so I still think there's an opportunity to help streamline this. But when you file an SW4 simplified stock water form to the state engineer's office, there's no drawings. There's a schematic that shows the slope, the width of the dam, and the height of the dam, and what your principal spillway is. If that's what we're talking about, that's fine. But if it goes beyond that, then we're just adding layers on engineering and design drawings that's required more than what the state engineer's office has the jurisdiction for the permitting. So again, I commend the office and the staff for really taking a hard look at this. And I think they've made some really good recommendations. I still think we need to put a little polish and define what is engineering design and should we move forward more the process forward up front in the application. So the trust fund applications are fairly robust. They ask you, similar to the checklists up front in the application, does a NEPA required? Is it core permit required? Is a water right permit required? A sage-grouse things? And you have to check the box. And it's yes or no, and then it's in the works or in process. So it doesn't mean they deny the application just because you haven't filed the water rights application yet. It can move forward on those type of projects. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. I absolutely think this is a good idea to keep moving this. So I still have a few concerns until we see what it actually looks like in design and engineering. I think that could be done with simple things like, let's take a more complicated project, the way we currently break those out in small water. You have a well, but you can do a well and a stock water pipeline and storage, or you can break that into 2 different projects. Typically in our capacity, and I never recommend designing all that stuff at once, because until you got a water well, you don't know if you have a water well. So you can spend a lot of time on engineering and design and survey work, doing 6 miles of stock water pipeline and storage and all that kind of stuff, and the number of tanks until you got a well. But on those type of things, it's going to be, most of them are going to exceed $35,000. So a typical stock pond or even a water well today of any depth, 400 to 800 feet, you're looking at $50,000 to $70,000. And so it maxes that out. But when we get into these more complicated projects, I would suggest what we do is start looking at lump sum type project. This is materials. This is contractor. This is engineering for those that need engineering design, and just kind of break it out that way versus spending a lot of time with staff going through and saying, how much did you pay for the footing, for the pipe, and how much for the concrete, how much for the tank, how much for the storage tank, how much for the panels to go around. I think that's over probably doing it. And so as we move forward with this, I would encourage the commission and Select Water and the office too, is to figure out how we can put a budget in those projects up front and look more towards those lump sum type bids or materials, construction, contractor, permitting, design, and just break those into large categories. So, Madam Chairman, I've got a lot of experience with the program over the year. I think this is one of the greatest things that the state of Wyoming has ever done from a standpoint because of the reach of the program. The more that we can get this program out there, folks, the better we are. I mean, we're going through one of the worst droughts in the history of the state of Wyoming, in the history of the nation right now. And this program is more needed than it's ever been. And so our challenge is to do it quickly, efficiently, timely, and on time and on budget. And I know you guys that look at these big projects, that's always a concern, on time and on budget. So, Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairman, I do have one other topic. It dovetails in with Jason's, but what I'd prefer to do if there's specific questions on the small water project program, as far as the proposal and stuff like that, I'd stand for any questions at this point in time.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. I again, always appreciate your background and experience. It does add some wisdom, at least for me. I do want to explore a minute about what you, some of the things you talked about concerning, requiring things that maybe aren't needed for a project up front with like engineering drawings and things, which I do appreciate those comments. But I guess part of what I understood in the presentation, that in effect, the way this would be designed is that so much of that would be driven by already existing kind of regulations in different areas of when you need a certain level of something more a more detailed level of engineering. Is that not correct? Am I not understanding that? Or is this something that's just becomes a wording issue more of a than substantially changing the proposal? I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, and I would agree. We would put that responsibility back on the sponsor. So if the state engineer's office in regards to a stock pond doesn't require stamp plans, we're not going to require stamp plans.
Right.
And in the end, even if they did, this affidavit checklist is going to say, yep, I've got my permit or I've got my whatever from state engineer's office. Check, sign it. Notice to proceed. Here you go. So again, that liability is going to go back on the sponsor to do that. And really what we need is an understanding going into the project of what we're going to pay for in the end. So I think, again, that comes back to communication up front. If it's kind of this lump sum idea, then we both have an understanding of, okay, well, what is involved in the lump sum? What can we expect? So we don't get surprised at the end, really. So I think it's communication and liabilities on the sponsor and having enough information in a drawing, a map, or whatever to be able to understand, along with the project description and the application, what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and Madam Chairman, if I can weigh in on that, and Jason did a really good job of explaining where this program started out. It was suspended at one point in time for a couple of years. There was new criteria that came out and said you can't apply for small water until you've done a watershed study at some point in time. About 2012, 13, the legislature got rid of that requirement and stuff. But there was a lot of scrutiny. It was a brand new program, and rightfully so, but it's matured. It's a great opportunity to move it forward. So again, I think this is I would characterize what we currently do in small water program. And because of this, all this that we've inherited from this uncertainty from all the way back to 2002 is the Water Development Office really serves as the project administrator oversight, because they're checking to see that you got your permit, you did your sage grouse clearances, and you got your 404 or whatever. And they've assumed that responsibility. They will not issue you a notice to proceed because they are become the project oversight administrator. When I deal with SLIB on the TP&E funds, or we deal with water or Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund, it's just inherent in those contracts we sign with those agencies. That's our responsibility to make sure all that's compliant. And so what I'd like to see the program do is, again, is if we have all these state programs, the more seamless that we can make them. We've got another one coming up that's near and dear to Senator Guru's heart called the outdoor recreation. And we'll talk about that next, Madam Chairman. But the more that we can make these seamless, the better delivery we can get out there for the people of the state of Wyoming.
Thank you both for that response. Other questions or comments? Yep. Senator Gru.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Senator Hicks, I appreciate your comments. I got this picture in my head of, just a service, irrigation district, 3 or 4, 5-member board. They're working their fields all day. They come, they choke down dinner, and then they go to the meeting, and they're putting together with they don't have all the horsepower in the world, and they're just doing some stock ponds on ranches and things like that. Is the way we're hitting this, are we going to hit the point where that group can sit down and without $250,000 engineering contract with somebody, be able to do a small stock pond water application, get it to the people that need to see it? Like I say, that we've got it set up where they'd have to take responsibility, but not necessarily, burdening them with so much cost up front that they just look at it and go, they're tired, they've been working on this stuff all day, then they get in and look at all this 50-page application, just go, oh, the heck with it. It's not worth it. And what we're trying to do is get that money in their hands to do the work for all the reasons you just said. Are we hitting that point with this?
Mr. Chairman, that's the direction that we're going. And again, I think, but you're right. And it's not the application process with small water. Of all the entities I deal with, it and SLIB are the simplest. I mean, SLIB's usually a paragraph. We're going to go construct, X number of stock ponds with a 10-inch pipe, blah, blah, blah. Estimated cost is $25,000. That's what we submit for those applications. But you're right. So the jurisdiction, let's use the example of stock ponds, is the state engineer's office. Each and every one of you today can go pull right off the internet, fill out an SW4, pay your $25 online, and go construct it, and then fill your completion report out and submit it to the state engineer. That's how easy it is. And that's where we're trying to get to. And so what we're trying to do, getting back to the shift in the burden of responsibility, is rather than having the water development off be the project oversight administrator, make sure that and I can't make this point more important. The reason that's important in a lot of these projects is because of small waters, we only take applications in November. SLIB takes them year round, trust fund twice a year. And for you folks that work out there, and we have 5 months to get work done in Wyoming. You can't get out and survey. So let me just run you through a typical scenario. And we do this all the time. As rancher X or farmer Y comes into the office and they said, I could use this or that. Well, it's at the time of the summer, we write all that stuff down. And so come October and November, we start putting together applications. And so we put the applications together. We submit a small water project program or a wildlife trust fund or a trust land preservation and enhancement project. And we do all those. We can't even get out into the field until April to start doing the survey work, to do the design on that. But once we get that done, we can do those, like if it's a pond, we can submit those online. We're ready to go. The minute that permit comes in, we're ready to go. Under our process now, then we have to submit that to the office, and then the office has to review that and then give us, and that's where it starts to tie up. not to mention the engineering requirement that I hope that we can get rid of. But that's where we start to slow down the state agency. That's where we start. Oh, and then by the time we get that done and get the permit number back from the state engineer's office, it's September, and then we got to go find a contractor, and by October 15th, we're done. Construction season other than the lower. So that constrains, and we need to maintain, to Senator Guru's point, make it the simpler, the more efficient that we can do. And and timely is very important, given the short construction season on most of these small water projects.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Senator Hicks or for Jason? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Cox.
This would probably be for either Jason or Senator Hicks, but in the end, the assurance that it's actually done on the ground is some photographs sent back to the office. Is that correct? I mean, what's the proof in the pudding that we actually did it, I guess?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cott. So yes, before and after pictures. So the after pictures would obviously show that it's done, and then that it's functioning as intended. And that's where currently we sometimes get as-built from the NRCS if they design them, or if there's an engineer involved in the project, they'll say, yep, it's working. In the future, we're asking for that some water management entity, I think I have that right, other than the sponsor, basically write us, or, we can have a little template that says, yep, it's functioning in manner intended, sign it, send it to us, we pay them.
So, Madam Chairman, just to add on to that, the other side of that is the pictures, and we do this with all three state entities. You got a detailed invoice that shows this is how many feet of pipe we put in, this is how much riprap we installed, this is, how many tanks we bought, here's the price. And so we submit those invoices for every one of those that shows every item that was expended, and then total it up and then say, it's 50% of, if it was a $20,000 project, we billed the water development program $10,000 out of that 50%, but it will have a detailed invoice of those expenditures plus the pictures.
All right, if there's no other questions, we will go to public comment. Okay, go ahead, Representative Struck.
Okay, this is kind of a little bit different, but I was told that they have emergency drilling now. You can get some wells done during the drought. How does that actually work then? A lot of these applications do take so long. How does that emergency one work if people are needing wells during the drought and you've got things going on?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, that's a federal program being administered by the Farm Service Agency. And so they've got their own rules and regulations on all that stuff. So it's not there's no state nexus associated with that. So, Madam Chairman, I don't know if you want to go to comment, but there is one other statutory issue as a potential modification.
Okay. And we do want to get to public comment before we go
Sure.
to lunch. So if you could go ahead and cover that, and then we could open up for public comment.
Yeah. So, Madam Chairman, the other thing that becomes a little bit problematic, and this is a legislative issue that we need to address. And so my colleague from Teton County is aware of the outdoor trust fund. So the legislature, any project that is more than $200,000 has to come to the legislature for approval. For the wildlife trust fund, any project over $400,000 has to come to the legislature. Under water development, any project over $5,000 has to come to Select Water Committee for approval. And it just seems to me like when we come in and the Select Water Committee is going through 76 small water projects that range from $5,000 to $35,000 and it's a little archaic, but it's just of the commission. Including programs, we set a threshold of 2. Programs, which then for individual project. Or a bill on either one of those, but it's something that the Select Water Committee, we need to change this $5,000 threshold. So
thank you for that. Any questions about that? I see Vice Chair Bonner, the question.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So to be clear, with that general threshold, that applies to all water projects and water development, not just small water. So if we went up to $400,000, I mean, what would be the impact of projects potentially outside the small water project program?
That's your baby.
Madam Chair, depending on the limit, my brain kind of goes to our planning projects, and they might range from 150,000 to 700,000, let's say. So depending on where you landed, if you wanted to not require approval of contracts with consultants for planning studies, you could think of it like that, to where, in March, we're bringing all the planning study contracts, all of the construction agreements, and then all of the new small water projects to you. So we would, if you raised it enough to where you'd catch pretty much all the planning studies, you wouldn't have to approve planning studies. The commission would approve planning study contracts and amendments to planning study contracts. Unless you raised it to millions and millions, you're going to have to approve the project agreements for construction. If you left it at 50,000, such as Senator Hicks's suggestion, I think you're probably going to be limiting yourselves to just the small water projects, because it's very rare we're ever going to have a project or a contract for less than 50 or an amendment for less than 50 for like a planning study.
Any other questions?
So, Madam Chairman, I was wondering if staff could opine whether that could be put into the water bill, or would it require a standalone bill?
Happy to do that. Josh, you want to come opine here? We love it when you opine.
Madam Chair, Josh Anderson, LSO. So yeah, I think, I don't think as staff, we would have an issue if we wanted to do it in either way. So either as a standalone bill, amending that section, I think you could amend that section in the water bill, or you could specifically exempt just the small water program from that statute. So I think three different options. I think either would work as far as which direction the committee wanted to go.
Thank you. Any questions for Josh?
Question.
Oh. Musical chairs here.
Yeah. So my question, I heard three options. So if we wanted to amend the $5,000 to 50,000 and 2811-101, we could do that in the omnibus construction bill, or it would have to be a standalone bill.
Madam Chair, I think you could do it in either way. You could do it standalone, or I think it would fit under one topic within the omnibus bill if you wanted to go that route.
Okay. Or we could just exempt, which would be the third option, correct?
So, Madam Chairman, if I can just interject, 16 years of experience and maybe a little wisdom. If you're going to do it, it'd be much better to put it in the omnibus bill.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to go to public comment unless someone else has a question. All right. Any public comment on this topic? We have no one registered online for this topic, correct? Yeah. So, all right. Yes, please come forward.
Madam Chairman, Justin Schilling, here on behalf of the 3,100 farm and ranch families here in the state that trust the Farm Bureau Federation to be their representative in our legislative process. Here to speak in support of this effort and to offer any help we can be, obviously at your disposal. If there's any further information or data on the impacts that you would like as this proceeds forward, but we certainly appreciate the good senator's efforts to streamline this process and deliver some relief, especially for our ranchers across the state in this current period of drought.
Thank you so much, Justin. Are there any questions for Justin? Thank you very much for your support, your input. All right, with no other public comment, we will close public comment. So committee, this is where we talk about what you want to do.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I may be a little bit late and I actually had a question for Jason. He's coming back in
Okay.
for the from the commission standpoint. Jason, I have a question for you regarding the topic about streamlining the small water program. What's the commission's action going to be, or what do we need to do on this?
Mr. Chairman, that's a good question. Since we're joint meetings now, well, we're actually in interim. So there's no approval right now. I think at this point, we're just asking if you like this concept, we're going to go forth, as we said, get it written up into a report and all that stuff, bring it back, give it to you guys in advance of November. And then at the November meeting, you would approve, and it makes sense probably for both bodies to approve since it's Water Development Commission criteria, for example, that we move forward with those documents as amended or as written at that point.
Okay. All right. Why don't we have the commission go first and do that, give some kind of direction.
Yeah.
And then Select Water will come back around the end.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we looking for a motion then from the commission? Is that Jason?
Well, the commission has adjourned, so I would just say give your opinion.
That's true.
You can take a raise of hands. I don't know. Does anybody disagree with this concept? And then maybe a motion, I suppose, from the Select Water Committee. It's a little interesting because we're talking about interim topics, but.
Right. So maybe again, it's really what you just said, but I think for you guys being adjourned, you could just give some feedback to Jason on your views. And then because it's an interim topic for us, I will probably ask for an emotion that they proceed and see if we get that with the work, and we will then come back in November to look at kind of more of the details. So I think we'll let them do that. Yours first of giving some input. Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's great. I like the work that's been done on it. I think simple and expediting these things is a great idea, reducing the workload. So thank you, staff, for all your work. And Jason, I would probably say a show of hands would be great if we all said we're kind of in favor of this proposal.
Great.
Well, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Great feedback. All right.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to make one comment. I worked for the Farm Service Agency for 34 years, and we administered programs similar to small water. It was very streamlined in our, like the approval process and so on. The burden was always placed on the participant to provide all the permitting, all of the other environmental requirements, NEPA requirements. The burden was always on the participant. It was never on the agency. There was a checklist. There was a spot check process of a small percentage, like 5%. Were actually asked to submit a file at the end of the program that showed the permit that was in there, the engineering plan, if it was necessary. We never looked at the engineering plans. They said we have them. And that burden was always on them. And the liability, once the project was installed, if something failed and someone was harmed, the liability was on the participant, not on the agency. And when they signed their completion statement, there was a statement that showed they accepted that liability. That's all I have to add to that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Garou.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, but before we get into a motion, and we've been talking a lot about numbers and levels of, what would be raising some of these figures to say, well, within 400,000, within 200,000, smaller projects. Anyone on the commission like to weigh in on what they think those numbers might be? Some numbers that they might feel comfortable with. I'm not asking for a vote. I'm just, anybody want to opine on that?
Anyone? Anyone? Maybe what might be helpful is I'm going to be asking for a motion specifically on the things presented by Jason in that plan, and then we will move separately to the other issue and maybe discuss it. That might, I think, putting the two together may be a little more confusing in terms of certainly outcome from the committee standard. So maybe we give them a little time to think about that while I ask for a motion. I'm looking for somebody to make a motion regarding the recommendations by the water development on this streamlining process.
Make that motion.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to have the the Select Water Committee, have the Water Development Office proceed with the plan they submitted today for streamlining. And is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. Is there any further discussion on that? Vice Chairman Boner. You're
Madam
kind of
Chairman.
far away from me. As usually you're right by me like this.
Well, it looks like the commission's surrounded at least.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Madam-
We definitely have them surrounded.
Madam Chair, could I interrupt for discussion for one quick thing?
Sure.
Representative Fornstrom had a question about the unproven versus proven aquifers that we thought we'd get Senator Hicks's comments on, because that is part of the recommendation to say everything's unproven. So
Okay, all right. Please proceed. Senator Hicks, did you have something on that?
No, Madam Chairman, I think that's the best way to move forward from a standpoint. Again, it's back to the liability instead of trying to do the geology reports and all this stuff. The federal government, I'm just telling you, we do a lot of stock water wells in the Red Desert. If you sign up for their program within RCS, and even with all the geology in the world, you still have dry wells and the producers on the hook. So they don't pay on dry wells. And so it's just consistent, I think, again.
Thank you.
Is, you assume when you're going to drill a water well, you have all the best information, but I'm going to guarantee you that a lot of times all the best information in the world doesn't guarantee you're going to hit water and you're on the hook. So I think this is just consistent with what we do with most of the other conservation programs.
Okay, thank you for that. And I definitely agree with that conclusion. So, but thank you. Let's see what Vice Chairman Boner's question is and kind of deal with some of the committee questions that they have now that we have an actual motion on the floor.
Right. So yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to make sure we're clear, this is talking about more the specifically what's in the PowerPoint right now. So I mean, in terms of the policy choice, it seems like this would be, moving forward with the tweaks they need in the administrative processes, but also kind of giving initial approval to the changes that would be in the omnibus bill that would clearly delegate responsibility to the local entity. Is that kind of what we're discussing right now?
Yes, I think that's a fair. The particular on page 14. Implementation on page 13 at the bottom. I think that's what the motion. We'll address that separately. Any other questions from the committee or the commission? All right, I think we'll vote on it. At this point, I think we can just, we don't really need to do a recorded vote. We would just say, why don't you just, if you're in favor, we'll just kind of raise your hand if you're in favor of the motion in the committee, and we'll see. I think we have our direction from the committee. So I don't know if you need more than that. I think we're probably, I don't know. We can do a roll call or a voice vote if you want, but.
I know we're good.
I think it gives you what you're looking for, which is the direction of the committee. I think everyone voted, so. All right, with that, I'll say that we've given that direction and the committee would like you to proceed along the lines of the PowerPoint and the implementation that's in there on that page 14. So I think is there something else you think we need, Jason?
Well, Madam Chair, I guess since this was a directive by the Select Water Committee, I'm rethinking if you should have a motion or not, because I don't know exactly how to put that in a report. They raised their hands.
We can
and
do
support.
We can do
So
you want to do a recorded vote, that we can do that if you'd like, if that makes it easier for
Sure.
you.
please.
All right, Eve, call the roll. Let's vote. Yeah. She's gonna need a mic. She's gonna need a mic to do the recorded vote. Sorry, gentlemen.
Senator Crum,
Aye.
Senator Driscoll is excused.
Excused. Thank you.
Senator Grew, Senator Jones,
Aye.
Senator Larson,
Aye.
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Chestick, Representative Fornstrom, Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Strzok, Vice Chair Boner, Chairwoman Lawley.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that is 11 aye and 1 excused.
Thank you, Eve. All right, let's move on to the issue about the dollar amount. There was a couple of different options presented, so the motion will need to kind of be specific as to one option. So committee, do I hear a motion? Vice Chair Boner.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that we increase the limit to $50,000 in Title 28.
All right, that has been seconded, that we increase the amount from $5,000 to $50,000 in Title 28, 111C. And so we've got a motion on the floor, a second. Any discussion by the committee, or even if the Water Development Commission has some thoughts on it? Happy to hear it. And just yes, Representative Larson.
My understanding is that motion that would put that in the omnibus bill, correct?
Oh, I thought you said in 28.
Well, we would put that change in the omnibus.
Yeah, correct. Yes. Yes. Sorry.
Madam Chair, if you wouldn't mind just speaking into the mic. Representative Larson doesn't have a mic, and that would be
Yes.
good to get on record probably.
Yes.
My understanding is that motion, we would be putting that language in the omnibus water bill, not a standalone bill.
Yes. All right, any other discussion on that motion? All right, we're gonna bring Eve back over and you're getting your steps in today, Eve. Do you think that one can be a voice vote? I'm not really sure how we're deciding what's a voice vote and what's not, but okay. I'm okay with that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, I think you got it. All right, I think that's all. Having finished, I think, the items that were on this part of the agenda for this topic, I will just say that we will recess for lunch and we will get back here at 1:45 and we will talk about the Colorado River impacts on the state of Wyoming. All right, see you after lunch.